The great thing about life on the street is you know how it's gonna be. It's always the same.
我要向職界競爭，我對佢有乜意啊？
On these streets, one color rules. Green. It's not 10 kilos we want 20. Because we're taking a lot away for a guy we hardly know, John.
嗰個成個係社會嘅人渣，條官放貴你，你知唔知我害死咗幾多人啊？身為警務人員，你應該攞你個職責盡忠。Don't blow your cover.
There's no such thing as an American anymore. No blacks, no whites, no nothing. It's just rich people and poor people. Hasta la vista!
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare, from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on, and invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature grindhouse style where we discuss two films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise, and at the end of each episode, along with our honorary Sleazoid, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon.
I don't even know how to explain the next awesome Patreon movies we have, but they're great. So join the sleaze.
We decide on all the official ratings and rankings for every film that we cover. Patreon subscribers also get an on-air shout-out and 2 bonus episodes every single month, which we have been doing for almost 3 years now,
Craziness.
Which is insane. And I just did the math on it. I think we officially have 70-plus bonus episodes now waiting for...
Wow. That's awesome.
Anyone who hasn't made the jump yet. Speaking of which, we got to hit those on-air shoutouts, and we have a lot of them this week. So thanks so much in advance. Sorry, I'm going to kind of have to rip through these, but it would take up the whole episode. So thanks to Alex Wilson Hodge, which I believe, Jamie, that's one of our co-workers from back at the grocery store.
Shout out to Alex.
Thanks so much, Alex.
Yeah.
We've got Connor McGonigal. We've got Cameron... Cavito, we've got Evan Goach, Dennis Duffy, Andrew Garris, Andrew Bistrom, 2 Andrews. This is the Andrew squad. Lucian Young, Alexander Paul, just Dave, Luke Plowman, Chad Burns, Naru. I'm so sorry about how long this is going to go on for. Anthony Pagliari, Punan, who's a returner. I'm pretty sure I've read that one before.
Nice.
Moodles. 2 people signing up at the $10 a month rate who joined us for the bonus screening we did last month of the New York Ripper, Lucio Fulci's New York Ripper from 1982. Matthew Bird and Donna, as well as Aiden and Drew Chow and Socialized Crucifixion, who both upgraded from $5 to $10. So thanks so much to all you guys.
Thank you very much, guys.
But I'm still freaking going here. Okay, we got W. Awesome. Butchery, Joseph, Benjamin Delory, James Francis, Michael Durer, and that's everyone.
Wow. Is that our biggest,
That's our biggest jump in a single 2-week period for sure. So Thanks so much to everyone who signed up this month. That's absolutely insane. We're incredibly grateful.
Very grateful.
And hope you guys are all enjoying those bonus episodes. And for the 4 of you this month who signed up to the $10, I can't wait to see you guys all at the this month's coming screening, which I haven't yet decided yet, but it's definitely going to be something crime-related to go on with the switch from Spooktober over to Noirvember. But anyway, that and that's the one plug for the week. The other plug, as always, Apple Podcasts. If you guys are listening on Apple Podcasts, and I see the stats, I see them, I see you now. Scroll down to the bottom right now as you're listening to this and give us a good old rating and review. It helps us climb the ranks over at iTunes and helps us find new listeners. We appreciate that. But yeah, those are the 2 plugs for the week. Welcome, everyone. Welcome back. As always, I am your host, Josh Lewis, and joining me also, as always, is my co-host,
Jamie Miller. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome. I think 2 weeks ago would have been the last time you guys, free listeners, would have heard from us, and it would have been the last free episode of Spooktober, where we had a special guest, film critic and programmer out of Toronto, Angelo Moretta, on to talk about some really, really strange sibling psychodrama horror of Alice, Sweet Alice from 1976. Which is a insane Catholic guilt giallo made out of some dude's friends' houses in New Jersey. And then we also talked about Basket Case from 1982, Frank Henenlotter, which is a splatter film turned legitimate, sensitive, brotherly melodrama.
I really did care about that meatball by the end.
Yeah, all he did was scream, but I felt his pain.
That's right. That's right.
So that was free for all listeners and any podcast listener of choice. That was the episode 2 weeks ago. But last week we had the bonus episode for the Patreon listeners exclusively, and it was a big one. We did a sequel to our Halloween trilogy episode back from 2018.
Yeah.
And we tackled the next 3 movies in the franchise, the really insane late 80s to mid 90s period of the Halloween movies when they were trying to compete with the Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Streets. So we talked about Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, and Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers.
That's right.
Which was the starring and introducing role of Mr. Paul Rudd.
It's crazy that that's the introducing role to him. Just wild.
Yes. Technically, Clueless came out a few months before, but he actually shot Halloween first, so that's why they got the introducing credit on it. Because it was his first feature-length production where he was in, a quasi-lead to supporting role.
Right.
But either way, the Halloween movies in that particular period are absolutely insane, and Jamie and I tried to break them down as best as we could, but there's some really baffling creative and production choices made, and some ones that are just strange enough that they're kind of fun to watch.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's what won me over, was just how strange those films are.
Yeah, if you want to see Michael Myers' baby murder druid cult, check out Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. And then
That's right.
Come on over to the patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast and listen to us try to break that one down. But that came out on Halloween Day, so that is it for Spooktober. It's done. It's gone.
We will miss it.
It'll come back. Yeah, I always have fun every Spooktober every time, and it's always a huge month of growth for us because I think people enjoy it so much. But we are done. It's over. Forget about it.
Right.
We are in officially Noirvember here on the Sleazoids podcast, where it's not exclusively noir, but we try to stick to the realm of crime cinema, detectives, undercover cops.
We're talking sad boys with guns, baby.
That's what we're talking about for sure. And for this week, I had a very special guest to bring on 2 films to kick off Noirvember, and he went pretty all out. But I'm going to let him introduce the films as always. He is a freelance film critic for all kinds of different places such as Little White Lies, Empire, Sight and Sound, Thrillist, Polygon. He is also a film festival and TIFF acquaintance, making his debut appearance on the show finally. We have joining us Kambole Campbell. Cam, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks. That's a very let's say, like, I don't know, it makes me feel grand with the long list of titles.
You deserve it. You deserve it.
Thank
Come
you.
on.
Thank you.
all those outlets in your bio. Come on, man. Come on.
I was fishing for it for sure. Anyway, the films that I picked for this double bill are Bill Duke's Deep Cover and Ringo Lam's City on Fire. So should I just talk about why I picked?
Yeah.
Oh, of course. Yeah, go for it. Just why? Because you'd only seen one of these before prior to actually choosing them, correct?
Yes, I'd only seen City on Fire before.
But you knew that Deep Cover would work.
Yes,
because it does.
In my bones. I knew there were sad boys with guns. I knew it had Larry Fishburne in it when he was called Larry Fishburne, and it kind of been on my eye, like it'd been on my radar for a while. Funnily enough, because I'd actually I'd booked a ticket to see it in a cinema before lockdown happened, and then
damn, I would have killed this in the theater.
So I had been wanting to see Deep Cover for a really long time, and I figured what better way to push me into finally watching it at home than making myself have to talk about it.
Absolutely.
There you go.
And it kind of stood out to me because Bill Duke isn't really like a big name in 90s film noir in the same way that someone like Carl Franklin might be. When you think kind of subversive film noirs like based around kind of racial politics in the States, my mind immediately went to something like Devil in a Blue Dress. So
great
Deep Cover
film
was something
with
I was
Denzel
really...
Washington, for anyone who hasn't seen that one. Also might have worked too, One False Move. I don't know if you've seen that. That one's a little bit more dramatic, I guess, but that's a really good Carl Franklin, doing local drug dealing melodrama qualities and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, and I think it probably would have lended to the claustrophobic kind of qualities of City on Fire, but I went for the one with Jeff Goldblum in it.
Hell yeah.
No, it was the right pick because we're basically just talking undercover macho existentialism a little bit, but man, I was absolutely blown away by Deep Cover especially.
Yeah.
These
are
really
amazing
phenomenal.
films.
So City on Fire, I thought I kind of associate it with the subversion of a kind of subgenre that was fledgling, which I found quite interesting because kind of heroic bloodshed was finding its roots in Hong Kong, maybe like the year before with another Chow Yun-fat film, About Tomorrow, and City on Fire kind of flies in the face of the sort of stylistic values of such films. You kind of have the kind of high-flying pageantry of John Woo stuff countered by Ringo Lam having, like you said, macho existentialism and just this crisis amongst this personal crisis amongst law enforcement, and it's presented in this very bleak, matter-of-fact kind of way, apart from a couple of occasions where cars explode in 2 shots of a revolver.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty cool to see someone other than John Woo doing, the kind of things that he would angle towards something more in like Hard Boiled, which he did in 1992, and we've talked about on the show. But like that was like all about sort of like the chaos and destructiveness of these people, rather than sort of the more romantic qualities of something like The Killer.
Yeah.
Which to be fair also has some really bleak elements to it. That does not have a happy ending when we talked about it, The Killer. But I do agree that Ringo Lam is definitely, before even the heroic bloodshed and the sort of like ballet Hong Kong destruction action movie sort of like became as popular as it was, he was already in some ways subverting some qualities of it, which is very cool. And also it was nice for you to bring on Ringo Lam, York University Toronto alumni. So
cool.
He's got a Canadian connection for some reason. He grew up in Hong Kong. He traveled to Canada to study film, and he went right back to Hong Kong and started making movies. But yeah, so the double feature this week is going to be City on Fire from 1987 and Deep Cover from 1992. We're going to be talking undercover cops having very existential and personal identity crises in a sort of quasi... City on Fire is a little bit more action-heavy. Deep Cover is a little bit more noir-heavy. But it's definitely going to be an interesting way to kick off Noirvember here on the Sleazoids podcast. And I think we are going to start off right here. We're going to do these ones, I think, chronologically. So we are going to take on City on Fire. All right, we are talking City on Fire, the 1987 Hong Kong crime thriller action film produced and directed by Ringo Lam and starring Chow Yun-fat and Danny Lee, who Jamie, you might remember as his co-star on The Killer.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And this predates The Killer by 2 years, so it was very cool seeing them sort of like do something before that. John Woo maybe even pulling a little bit. I mean, John Woo obviously used Chow Yun-fat first in A Better Tomorrow, as Cam brought up at the top of the show there. That Better Tomorrow, I think, came out 86, so just 1 year before City on Fire.
Okay.
But,
and they switched roles this time too, right? Because I think in The Killer, the other guy is the cop, or kind of the
Danny Lee is the cop, like kind of seeing the virtues of Chow Yun-fat's government assassin. No, not government assassin, but hitman.
Right.
Yes.
And kind of they forge a very similar brotherly bond, but over a much longer period of time in The Killer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and from what I understand with this one, Ringo Lam actually met Chow Yun-fat in acting school. That they both went to actor school in Hong Kong before he traveled to Toronto, where he actually studied film, and then he came back to Hong Kong. And when he came back to Hong Kong, he was basically hired for a lot of just very, very basic journeyman, local studio work. Like, it was a lot of like very similar to what we're going to be talking about next week on the show with Seijun Suzuki. He was someone who was kind of hired to carry the B movie from the script stage to the editing stage and put it out. But he was actually so good at basically, getting his stuff done and the movies coming out and actually being decently successful. He made comedies, he made crime films, he made basically any film they would give to him, he made. But because he was actually doing such a good job, one of the producers, which I believe name was Carl Maka, he gave him a blank check to basically make whatever kind of film he wanted. And with that check, he made City on Fire. So between this and A Better Tomorrow, the sort of like Hong Kong gangster action craze that we've covered on the show with talking about John Woo's The Killer and Hard Boiled, which we've done once before, they basically invented or at least popularized, even if they, a lot of elements came from different kinds of films. A lot of filmmakers are pulling from different kinds of people all the different time, but they basically popularized this sort of heroic bloodshed melodrama that John Woo is very famous for, with men on opposite sides of the law that have shared codes or guilt about the violence. And there's this in particular adds an undercover aspect to it, which adds shades of sort of like performance and identity into it, and really lets us get into Chow's character, who in this looks like he belongs more with the criminals than he does the cops, and he understands in many different ways their codes of brotherhood and their skillful craft more than he understands sort of the very, I guess, manipulative or mechanical use of that the police force makes of him. Yeah. Like a lot of this ends up coming down to the crisis at the heart of Chow Yun-fat's character, who is being asked to infiltrate these jewelry heisters in Hong Kong. And he has a lot of trouble being undercover because the job requires him to become friends with people and then basically guide those people to their deaths. And he has obviously a moral crisis with doing that. And then especially that is just compounded by watching the sort of like lieutenants and other cops who are not his uncle, who he actually has a relationship with, who basically just want to use him as a tool and see no sort of relationship or friendship with him at all. He actually sees more friendship amongst the criminals.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he gets real close.
That's one of the things that struck me most about both of these films, really, is that's very cold presentation of the police as just these, not just like kind of in physical presence, like very chaotic people, but also these very cold careerists. Like every decision made by, I can't remember the dude's name, but he has that big leather jacket and he kind of just, the one who gets bricked.
Yeah, I just called him Lead Dickhead.
I think his name was he was Inspector John.
Gotcha.
He's the young up and comer.
Yeah, it's Inspector John. And he sort of just makes these decisions, just being like, well, this would make us look great. Whereas at every turn where Ko Chow wants to just get the hell out of there. And it's kind of the same. A lot of it is the same with Deep Cover, which I suppose we'll come to, where it's just, these decisions aren't being made for the sake of things being prevented or any kind of law being kept, but it's just, this will make me look real good to the big boys.
Right, and it's like the whole point was we thought for the benefit of the community, and it seems like that's never in their discussions whatsoever. It's never like what what will benefit these people. It's always the career and it's always like discussions of putting other people in danger in order to get it done. Specifically, Chow a lot of the time. Because he's kind of coerced into this, right? He doesn't even want to do it at first, and
no, he's basically at the beginning of the film, he's kind of just a local street informer who's kind of into different rackets, but nothing as severe as killing people or robbing people or arms dealing or anything particularly severe. He's kind of just a low level street thug who used to be, I guess, a police informer, and so they kind of approach him to get back into the work and actually go full undercover, because there is this crew of really professional diamond heisters who are making, pulling off these robberies and doing so in a way that is very destructive. And Ringo Lam really wants to highlight, how kind of wild this crew can be. I mean, the opening scene of this is an undercover cop like blowing his cover trying to make a call to a superior and then just getting absolutely gutted and bleeding all over, like the sheets while like neon lights are like spinning around him, and there's even like handheld chaos of like running through the markets and everything like that.
And the choice of him wearing a big white sweater is just fantastic because the blood is everywhere, and it's just
not
so
just
violent.
that, but the shot behind the big kind of it's kind of like a tarpaulin sheet where he just kind of presses, like dramatically presses against it, and you just see the blood like spray towards you before that. It's just
and also I love the initial like mood that the film gives you, because it starts with that kind of sad but somewhat romantic saxophone that's going on, and then it just
very smooth jazz.
And then it cuts into people shopping and then right into that stabbing. So it's just an awesome introduction to kind of set that mood, that noir mood.
Well, and to open on something like so gruesome, especially, really does set the mood, and also the way that the police kind of like respond to that kind of stuff they set up like right away. Like I love when they're loading up the corpse into the ambulance, and they're like literally just like fumbling it around and like throwing it around, and they're like, stop, like have some respect for the dead for a moment. As they're very gracelessly like picking him up off the ground like it's just a regular thing that they see every day, which, to be fair, could very well be in this particular universe, but it's not for Chow Yun-fat, who's playing this guy named Cao Cho. And he is introduced in typical Chow Yun-fat fashion as the coolest motherfucker ever, who is he's smoking a cigarette. He's got a popped denim shirt underneath a giant oversized jacket, to which he's also wearing a bow tie.
The bow tie and denim shirt is like, I've been going back and forth on it all day.
That is style, son.
Like truly something only the man who was introduced to burning money to light a cigarette can pull off.
Literally this is the look no one else could pull off. I think he's also wearing corduroy pants and combat boots as well. He's just nailing this look.
While we're talking about fashion, then I got to say that there's one gangster in this where he has a meeting, and he's wearing the most like badass turtleneck and chain that I've ever seen in my entire life. He's got this like black blazer with a black turtleneck, gold chain. He's looking slick. I just had to say it. The fashion in this movie is unreal. Next level drip, y'all.
the late 80s, especially in I mean, like it was a crazy time for everyone in fashion, but you love seeing it in Hong Kong, because Chow Yun-fat, he just swaggers his way through the club. He's getting into fights and getting arrested over, he has a girlfriend that he, maybe intends to marry, but he's also pursuing other girls. He's basically just in like kind of like this weird rom-com movie where he's a little bit into loan sharking and he's a little bit into drugs and all that, but he's not really doing anything particularly terrible amongst the community. And then he is asked, and they say, dude, we need you to go undercover to take down these heisters because these heisters are absolutely ruthless. And they are ruthless, and they are incredibly skilled. The heist sequence that we see them pull off is like absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Where Danny Lee, who's playing a robber named Tiger, they pull off this heist in what has to be a sequence that had to have inspired Heat, where they basically like, they make their way in by like very quietly and skillfully like grabbing the guard and taking the power out and taking the elevator up, and there's like this very like subtle pounding score going in the background, and it's a completely silent set piece as we track their process of them putting the masks on and waiting till the dude is buzzed in before they decide to actually run in themselves. And it reminded me very specifically of the bank heist scene in Heat, and even ends on like the pure destruction shootout in the streets of the cars and the chaos outside, which is very similar.
Yeah.
But the way that they pull off this heist is very thrilling. Ringo Lam, I think, has a good sense of, again, tracking their process and the way that they sort of like think their way through what they're doing, and how impressed, honestly, the cops are by kind of what they do, but then also nailing that destruction and that gruesomeness by the end, because at a certain point, they make one mistake, and that is one of the old ladies comes into the jewelry store looking to buy something, and she sees everyone being held up while they are basically like torturing the bank manager, trying to get him to open up.
Yeah, like stabbing his hand and all that craziness.
Yeah, really gross. And she runs downstairs and immediately alerts the police, and everyone starts coming in. But Danny Lee does something that's really cool, and he basically comes down, stands at the bottom of the elevator, and pretends that he's just a customer going up. Yeah. And he's just pressing that thing. The cops come over and they're like, "Hey man, don't go up there. What are you doing? There's robbers up there." And they tell him to like, push back and get out of the way. You can see Danny Lee as he gets behind them, immediately just starts beating the shit out of them, pulls out his gun, the woman's screaming. And because one of them attacks him, he actually just straight up like executes one of the cops, like right there. Giant bloody squib all over the fucking wall.
Because like we already had that moment in the intro where the guy gets stabbed, but I didn't know how far we were going with the squibs or blood work. And this shot is wild because you just see the gunshot, and then his whole back of his head just like splatters with blood on the white wall behind him. It's a wild shot.
Yeah. Well, and outside they're doing shootouts where cars are flipping. Ringo Lam is cross-cutting between like the jewelry being stuffed into the duffel bag and then like cop cars exploding and sending fire to the air in slow motion.
And like they're huge fires
he really
too.
wants to highlight the chaos and destructiveness.
Yeah, and I love there's this awesome shot of them doing the shootout on the street, and in the background you just see the cop cars on fire, and the fires are massive, and there's just huge bellows of black smoke, and the detail is fantastic.
There's this very, very exaggerated impact, which kind of surprised me because of the on first viewing surprised me because of this film's reputation as being quite no nonsense about it and very plain and brutal about its violence. And then you kind of out of nowhere have, I think it's Danny who just fires a couple of shots from a revolver. One of them goes through a windscreen and the car just completely overturns and explodes. And it took me by surprise. That emphasis on impact.
Yeah, see, what you don't understand is that is subtle by Hong Kong standards, right?
Yeah, and it just kind of, my mind flashed to a similar sequence in Hard Boiled when I think it's a bit in the shootout in the warehouse where someone fires a shotgun at a bike and that just blows the hell up as well. But even, like you were saying, the fewer flames, I guess, but it's, I suppose, the impact is still there. A bit more exuberant.
Definitely. Well, and I would say too that like we talked a lot about the chaos of John Woo, but I would say that there is a significant difference in Ringo Lam's chaos, which is that it's not this this beautiful pageantry of destruction or chaos or collateral damage of any kind. Like John Woo, he is obsessed with, sort of the tangible materials in his frame, and watching the debris fly, and watching all of these elements move gracefully almost in his slow motion shots. Ringo Lam is really focused on the gruesomeness and the poundingness and the bluntness of it. Yeah. And so despite the fact that he is taking it to exaggerated places for, maybe like a smaller budget American crime film or something like that, I do get a very different feeling. Like the fact that I'm thinking more of something like Heat, for example, like that's not something I would necessarily compare in its action to what John Woo is doing. So the fact that I'm thinking of something like that, I think shows us that he's doing something a little different, and that gets even more different by the fact that there isn't a lot of action that plays out like this. I mean, like the finale is, when we get to it, is like almost incomprehensible in terms of like that spatial geography of it, because it really is just meant to be painful to watch in that way. So despite the fact that there is a similar sense of mood here, I think, happening in some of the downtime, like some of the stuff with Chow does have a little bit of that, sort of like a street level melodrama angle that John Woo liked to do. There's a lot of that sort of like neon light streets, and the jazzy sort of canto pop and canto rock that plays in the clubs that he's infiltrating in, and things like that. So despite that, I do think that there is something a little bit different happening here, and it gets really clear to me as the undercover stuff starts to get taken very, very seriously, because there are elements of this that are almost comedic in just how absurd the robbers can be, and how absurd the police reaction can be at the same time. There is a little bit of that hard-boiled element of sort of like that strain of new cop versus sort of like the old guard, and same with the criminal aspect, where Hard-Boiled a lot of the time took a look at sort of like the young blood criminals are much more willing to be psychopathic and have no codes or respect or quasi-ethical mobsters. Right. And Ringo Lam, I think, takes on this idea that there almost is no ethical decisions to be made in this context. Yeah. There is just so much pain and destruction, and so much of this is just honestly more sort of suspense driven. I think of the scene of like Chow Yun Fat, like basically he infiltrates this group by trying to sell them arms, and his higher up at the police station basically gives him these arms, and he's a little bit conflicted about that, because he's like, now I'm going to become an arms dealer, and I don't really want to give these guys guns. I've seen what they can do with guns. Yeah. I don't feel like it's not a good idea to give these guys guns, is broadly his opinion on the subject. But they were like, we got to give them guns so that, we can get them to trust you. We can get them, get you involved with them.
I think they mentioned like tracking the guns too in some way.
Yeah, I was going to say, just it's that element of control that comes in, where he's saying like, we, at least this way we'll know how many guns that they have. They're going to get them from somewhere else anyway. And I was really fascinated by that idea of this institution just being like, look, like it's going to happen either way, but as long as we know, then it's fine. Yeah,
as long as we're in control, it'll go completely smooth.
and of course it all goes fine, just as they said.
Yeah, that's how this story ends up.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because that pairs really well with Into Deep Cover, which Deep Cover takes that on to like the furthest extent, like historically, that it happened in the United States, with like the CIA literally getting involved in drug dealing.
That was a major like kind of connective element for me with Lawrence Fishburne being, well, I suppose we'll get into it in a bit, sure. But with him being given these being given drugs to deal as like a tool to further his relationships that will supposedly do the greater good in the long run, and he's just like, look, I don't get why I'm just a dealer, and he's just and
seems not good, seems not right, doesn't feel right.
Yeah, where it's just that there's that kind of that objection, like smooth over this paltry thing, just being like, don't worry about it, like at least we know.
I could have swore our slogan was protect and serve, but it's I don't know.
Something doesn't seem right.
Yeah, but I like how much of this, like, as we get into this part of the film, and it does become, how does he get these jewelry heisters to let him in, to trust him? It does become a series of just sort of not action scenes, really suspense scenes of, you know, like him meeting them at the cemetery where he's going to, you know, sell them or get them to inspect the guns and see if they like the guns and want to buy them. And
that had some spooky vibes, honestly. That scene was pretty cool. It has these nice, like, wide shots of just the headlights that are for the lighting.
The foggy cemetery itself.
Yeah, and then there's a part where Chow, like, kind of trips or is pushed, and his foot goes into a hole, and like a head comes out of it. Like, it's just a very, very kind of strange sequence, but it kind of adds to that you know, the thought of death and violence and stuff like that.
Yeah, he gets mud and a skull stuck on his combat boot because he slips into a grave because he's terrified that these guys are going to find the recorder that he has on him, which he's been, you know, forced to have on him.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ringo Lam is very good at wringing suspense out of, like, very simple scenes like this, like obviously this undercover deal in the cemetery. Even just the mood and the location work of the cemetery itself does a long way of doing that, but also the filmmaking. But also, like, after he does, like, this extended chase scene where Chow Yun-fat has to go from sort of, like, casual walking to an on-foot chase to a car chase, trying to basically lose this tail who is after him because basically sort of like the young cops, John, led by John, they just think that he's a dude who works for this crew. Or they're finding the guy who sells him guns, which is technically what he's doing, but they don't realize that he's doing it, you know, on behest of the police undercover. So he's basically spending this whole movie trying to get involved with these criminals and also evade the police, despite being actually a cop. It's very sort of similar to, I guess you would say something like, I don't know, the Departed, I guess, or a lot of people have made a lot of note on how much this inspired Reservoir Dogs. It's kind of been talked to death that Tarantino has basically admitted that he wholesale, like, stole scenes from this, like Chow Yun-fat in the Tim Roth role and Danny Lee in the Harvey Keitel role.
I mean, Reservoir Dogs is basically the last 20 minutes of this film expanded to feature length, right?
Yes, that's literally what it is. Yes, where they get.
I haven't watched it in so long, but yeah, that whole scene. I was like, right, well, this is kind of, you know, just the conclusion to something.
Yeah, starting from, like, the like Mexican standoff that they get into in the final hideout where they're hiding from the cops after the heist kind of goes wrong. That's, like, literally the beginning. That's the opening. The heist going wrong is the beginning of Reservoir Dogs. So yeah. It's funny. But yeah, so this chase scene is very well done, and again, it tracks the sort of process and decision making of Chow Yun-fat. Like, there's one point where he's very casually walking and taking note of them, but then a bus goes by, and he uses that to basically, like, run alongside the bus so they can't see him, like, basically like get away. And this whole time he's trying to get to a bowling alley, which I think is where he's keeping the guns. This is why he's trying to lose the tail, because he has all the guns in this locker at a bowling alley where and he doesn't want to get caught with those guns, obviously, by those cops. They end up sort of, like, catching him anyway, despite the fact that you know, he runs into Danny Lee at the bowling alley. He ends up actually selling them the pistols. And something, again, I always love about Hong Kong films, I love how guns are illegal. So the dramatics of an arms deal, like, this is so intense. The way that Ringo Lam is filming this is like, this might as well be a nuclear codes weapons deal in the context of his filmmaking. And he finally gets to, you know, Danny Lee's hideout, and he's being introduced to the boss, and he's being introduced to, you know, all the different crew members. He's selling them 3 pistols.
Yeah.
and a couple rounds to go along with them. I think it's like 90 rounds or 100 rounds or something like that.
I can't remember how soon after the sequence it is, but I just love that shot where the guy just, like, opens this really, like, ostentatious briefcase and it's like 4 guns, and everyone's just like, nice.
Yeah, it's really quaint and cute in that kind of way, which is always so fun to watch. That's also why there's also so much more stabbings and stuff in these movies as well. But also there's sort of a subplot with him and his fiance that is kind of going on in the background. So that car chase is also expanded upon because the gun deal is at 10 a.m. But also his wedding and marriage registration ceremony is at 10 a.m. at the same time. Yeah. So there's also some drama like sort of like wrung out of that as well, which I kind of like, because at first I thought it was like a little bit silly for like the context of the rest of the film, but it does sort of lend itself to, you know, the kinds of stuff that he would be doing if he wasn't told to be an undercover cop. Yeah. Like there's so much of just Chow Yun-fat like hanging out, being a goofball. At one point he just starts like dancing in the street. Yeah, and like popping his collar with his jacket and stuff.
Yeah, and like pointing at ladies. And then the one scene where he's in the apartment and in order to get her friend to leave so that he can like basically have sex with his fiance, is he just gets naked in front of her and it's just like, all right, so either you're joining or you're leaving. And it's like, that's obviously probably an inappropriate move, but very funny watching Chow just shake his ass at her and then like run into the shower. Like it's just, and also it's the dialogue and the jokes are very like, I don't know, kind of gross in a way. Like he gets in and they playfully acting as if she's like, I'll call the cops on you for sexual assault or whatever. And that is like a way for them to flirtatiously get into making out. And so it's very, very strange. But I don't know. It's very funny and charming in a way too.
It's like a scene in the cadence of Police Story, which is very odd.
I was just going to say that.
Like like when it's kind of put in between all of these scenes of brutality and you just have him goofing around, like,
right.
It's perfect in its own way, just even in isolation. But yeah, I think just that element of these personal connections, like all just being utterly destroyed by his job, like his familial connection with his uncle, who's also or basically his CI or whatever. I don't know what you call it.
Yeah, I forget what you call that. He's the guy that he reports to for his undercover mission, and the only guy who actually knows that he's an undercover informant.
Yeah, and it's just like his uncle. So at the same time, he's having conversations like, you've got to give these guns to these jewel runners. He's also saying, also you should visit your grandma sometime.
And I love the like after the exchange, what they do is they have what's the lead bad guy's name again? His character name.
Tiger.
Opposite of Chow.
Tiger.
Tiger fucking drives Chow to the airport to like meet up with his girlfriend that's going to Canada with some like random other dude or whatever. And I just found it very funny because it's like this small moment where the movie turns into slightly like a romantic comedy where he's trying to get to the girl at the airport at the last second.
Yeah, it's that big third act, it's raining.
But in this version, he gets caught for arms dealing by cops, and she just goes to Canada anyway. So it's like, I loved that little that one scene of this kind of like he's driving him to the airport, but it's the guy that he's doing the arms dealing with. It's fantastic. Yes.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I think that Cam's point is like absolutely spot on. That was my read on it too, was that, you know, these kind of goofier elements, like, for example, his arms dealing brutal killer criminal, being the guy driving him to the third act rom-com scene where he begs for forgiveness. Like the reason that something like that works in this film is because it is about how much life he is filled with and how much the job itself is dehumanizing and destructive, and weirdly enough he actually ends up having more intimate personal relationships with these criminals. Like, I love when he finally has downtime with these guys, because they invite, after he gives them the guns, they invite him into the heist, and him and Danny Lee actually bond basically over how their jobs have, you know, ruined their marriages. It basically, because he basically watched that happen, he has to explain to Danny Lee that that's what he was doing. And so
that scene is so good.
Yeah, and it's literally just like them, the 24 hours before the heist is about to happen, like basically just hanging out together in a flat, becoming friends with them, talking to them about their lives and their futures and their hopes.
I think my favorite detail of that scene too is how just loud and obnoxious and drunk they're being. And then there's this shot of the guy that's at head level and he's trying to sleep on a bunk right next to them. And it's just this long shot of him sleeping there. And I'm like, oh, that guy's probably really bothered. And then a good, I don't know, like minute or two into it, he actually gets up and is like, what the fuck, guys? And like turns around. There's some really good subtle comedy to this, even amongst all the chaos and destruction too.
Yeah, and I just think that that's so important because it shows you what's being lost, what's being snuffed out,
exactly,
by the work that they are doing, and which really translates. Like that scene happens right before they go and obviously pull off this heist, but a lot of the heist goes wrong. The alarm goes off and they panic. One of them shoots the jewelry store clerk to like a bloody pulp.
Oh yeah, it's like 6 shots into the chest. It's just ruthless.
Yeah, and obviously Chow Yun-fat is very like upset about that. And there's also a dramatic reveal that happens in the scene where earlier in the film, Chow Yun-fat from his uncle is shown a sketch of the guy who killed the undercover cop from the opening scene in the stabbing.
Right.
And the sketch is, he's like, how am I supposed to make out this sketch? Because it's literally just a hat, sunglasses, and like the face covered up by a straight jacket.
Yeah.
And he's just like, there's no way I could identify this person based on this sketch. And what does Danny Lee do in the scene? He puts on the exact same fucking outfit. So the second Danny Lee zips up his coat and he sees the glasses and the hat and the coat the exact same way it was drawn in the sketch, he's like, holy shit, I just became friends with the guy who killed the previous undercover cop. And that obviously really upsets him because he's just like, holy shit, someone who is a ruthless killer is someone who is, I am now personally intimate with in a way. So those complex feelings infiltrate this heist gone wrong, turned into a really gruesome shootout on the street that, again, focuses on the collateral damage and the destruction, the shattered glass, the corpses lying on the streets, even like the blood all over the gold and things like that in the imagery.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that technically he sees his job as sort of like preventing these kinds of massacres from happening, but that's not really what they're doing. They're actually just having him be a part of it. And what's interesting is that, so he's conflicted that the people he's now close with are killers, and he knows that they're killers. And then, but also he's conflicted by their deaths, watching these criminals be killed beside him and just gruesomely gunned down. He's now close and sort of like intimate with these people as the cops start ripping them to shreds, and that freaks him out too. So Chow Yun-fat's having like a huge existential crisis in the middle of this shootout.
Yeah, and then you even get that one. This will be short anyway, but it's that you get that one shot of him where I believe it's him saving Tiger, and then it's one of the main cops that we've seen a couple times throughout the film, and he, without even like flinching, just takes the gun and shoots him and kills the cop. Like it was like a very natural thing to him, so he's definitely having that crisis in the middle of the shootout, and you can just see that because he openly shot that cop without even thinking, like it was an instinct. So I thought that was a really cool detail as well.
Yeah, just like to that effect, the sort of emotional isolation for Chow Yun-fat's character is just at this point the film's been going on something like an hour, and he only really has like a real conversation about what his job is doing to him at like the hour mark with Danny Lee, and like you just realize that he's had like nothing to cling on to this point, and there's like been no emotional support even from a person, like the only person who knows what he really is truly doing and is a family member to him, but still keeps him at this sort of emotional distance. Like when he shows his uncle like the picture of his fiance, he's just like, look, isn't she pretty? And he's like super proud of himself, and he's just like, yeah, but what does that matter? And he doesn't really talk about anything meaningful with him. And then he finally has this with Danny Lee's character, and then it just all goes to shit almost immediately. So just that, I just felt that isolation, which of course crosses over to Deep Cover as well, just really compelling.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, like that's sort of like the main subject of the final hideout scene, which we described already as sort of like the opening scene of Reservoir Dogs. Essentially, Tarantino basically stole it. But the robbery goes wrong. They go to this hideout, and they're basically like, "This is our first robbery that's gone wrong. The only new aspect is this dude, Chow." So they were like, immediately, he's the new guy, he's the rat. Everyone's pointing guns at each other in here. And Danny Lee, in the same way that Harvey Keitel does in Reservoir Dogs, he's like, no, it can't be him. He saved me. I've bonded with him. He is not the guy that you're looking for. And this is sort of like the dramatics of this as the boss doesn't believe him. He's like, no, there's no chance. I've done the math on this. The only possible thing that could have gone wrong here is that the new guy's a cop. That's it.
Yeah.
And obviously he's right, but basically this leads into the cops surrounding their hideout, which is basically just sort of like this weird like abandoned shack in the middle of like a field almost.
Yeah, this ending really reminded me of that Kelly Gang movie that we watched.
Yeah, where they surround them inside the
just start
the
fucking
little hut that they're
rifling at them. Yeah, it's a very, very similar ending.
Yeah,
weird
and
because the
I
only
really
thing-
like the look of it too. The metallic hideout lit by like just the police lights and the rays of moonlight and stuff.
Yeah, and
It's very
then
moody.
as it goes, the lighting turns into the bullet holes from the night sky coming into the shack.
Yes.
So it's great.
During this final scene, which is really, really sort of like emotionally painful to watch, because it's basically all of these complex feelings that Chow Yun-fat has of, sort of feeling like the police are a mechanical, impersonal force of destruction, and that there is a more sort of personal and intimate brotherhood amongst the criminals, but they also are brutal in their own fashion, and he's just living with that contradiction in him at the moment. And he basically causes the criminals to get into a shootout where they're literally shooting each other. Like, the boss shoots one of the underlings, and then they both shoot the boss together.
Yeah,
Chow Yun-fat gets hit by gunfire. It's uncertain whether it's from the boss or whether it's from the cops, which I think is, sort of like meant to be a little ambiguous there on how exactly he got shot, and he's bleeding out. But as Chow Yun-fat is like bleeding out next to this one person in this film he thinks of as like a friend right now, and he so badly doesn't want to betray him, and he also doesn't want to lie to him, so he admits, he's like, I am a cop. And Danny Lee is obviously like really, really upset learning that.
Yeah.
But what does he say? He says, kill me, because we can't be on the same side, and I don't want to kill you. And it's so brutal that he's just sitting there bleeding out. He's looking at this dude who killed the last undercover agent, and it's the person he has the most feelings for in the entire world, basically.
Yeah. Oh my god.
And he just asks him to kill him. He's like, please just kill me.
Yeah.
It's so upsetting.
It's like, and it's so like, and it's not like the movie doesn't have a ton of darkness throughout, but there was nothing yet that really, got to that kind of depressive state. Like, it was just, that's so sad. It's so empty. There's no hope left. And yeah, it really is a gut punch when it gets to that point. Especially Chow being such a likable character. Like, he's just such a charismatic and goofy guy. So for him to end in such tragedy, it's just
Begging
it's a lot
for
to take.
death.
Yeah. From the criminal he's made best friends with. It's just oh my god. So sad.
Yeah, well, and credit to Danny Lee too, who in this scene, he has to go from being immediately so pissed off at him for the betrayal of him being a cop, to when the cops come in and arrest them, Chow Yun-fat is actually lying, bled out, dead on the ground, and Danny Lee's expression immediately goes to like heartache. He's like, that was, holy shit, my friend is also just dead. The cops killed him as well. They killed their own undercover agent. And when his uncle comes in, he immediately starts like freaking out, because he was just like, yeah, so some careerist basically just killed my nephew and his friend and his relationship, basically just so that, they could very cynically start this heist and all of this destruction was the idea. Like, they're the ones who planned it. Like, they were the ones who actually, when they found out that Chow Yun-fat was undercover, they said that he should join the heist against the the protests of the uncle, who was like, it's too dangerous.
Yep.
And he ended up being totally right. I do love that the uncle gets to beat John over the head with a brick at the end.
I was just going to say.
He just faces him with that thing.
And nobody does a damn thing. They're like, you know what? I don't like that guy either. That's what it felt like. It's so funny.
It's just that sequence. It's kind of that sequence of shots where it's. I'm pretty sure. Does it go from the Hawaii letter to then John with the cars and saying like, well, this is like the first in a series of cases that we could bust. Like, we've done real great work here.
Yeah, I think it does.
Just that really ruthless cut from just this life being extinguished to this other guy just being like, well.
And we also have that line too that he says where he's like, but I have to follow you to Hawaii. It's so similar to like he says something similar in I think The Killer, where it's something about Mickey Mouse or whatever. It's just another like kind of like romantic gesture to the bro that you just made.
Yeah, and the final shot is this really ghostly, like, overhead pull-out shot of the corpses, like of Chow Yun-Fat and the boss and all the dead bodies that they left inside the hideout, and then it's crossfaded with the dancing of Chow, who was so full of life earlier in the film, which is what kind of clarified me all the goofier elements were there to be. For.
And then you also have like he does that fade with the freeze frame. He does a fade of him dancing, and then all of the bullet holes that are lighting up the room. So it's like you have both those images of just his life, like where he was lively and flirtatious and goofy, and then just the death, and it's tragic, really tragic.
Yeah. Well, pivoting towards the reductive rating round on City on Fire, which for you, Cam, is where we remove all the words, all the nuance, and reduce the movie between a number between 1 and 5. But it's also turned into like final statements and closing statements. So if there's anything like, we didn't any lines or scenes we didn't get to, we usually bring them up here as well that we make sure we wanted to bring up. But for me, this one gets a really solid to maybe even a high 4. I think because I'm just so well versed in the sort of like heroic bloodshed drama stuff of Hong Kong and John Woo's movies especially. There was a lot of this that I was pretty familiar with, but the stuff that Ringo Lam does that is different and that he hones into in the sort of the bluntness and gruesomeness and existential quality on like a more sort of like intimate personal level, I did find really, really strong. And I do think that there is the way that he stylistically differentiates himself from Woo by not doing the sort of like controlled ballet, and just that bluntness and that break, that sort of like an entire city, as is indicated by the title, like in this fiery psychological breakdown almost, where you're a split second away from being gutted or being shredded with gunfire by someone who you maybe consider a friend, and the cops and crooks are both escalating each other until they kind of like burn everything down. It reminded me a little bit of sort of like Fritz Lang's M, where we talked about that kind of like being like an entire sort of like city point of view almost. And in some of the action sequences, when this extends to the full destruction on the entire streets, this is what it kind of reminded me of a little bit. And the city kind of gone mad with hysteria and paranoia and these anxiety-ridden sort of like crime set pieces and stuff like that. So I think that the sort of like sweatiness and franticness of it is a little bit different than what we would see from John Woo, and I definitely felt that by the time we got to the end of the film, and it kind of merged its police story Jackie Chan-esque domestic comedy sequences with like a full-blown sort of extinguishing of a life on screen, and you definitely feel that. So solid 4 from me.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in the same boat. Just a couple of highlights I wanted to mention. Where one was that great one of the chase sequences with Chow. He starts sliding down like an escalator, or like the railing of an escalator, and there's bumps in between each, like I'd say every like 5 to 10 feet, and he just jumps and uses his ass to jump every single time, and it's just a really great stunt and a great shot. And then another cool stunt is when he is like holding on to the truck that's driving down the road. And I just wanted to mention those two because there's like some genuinely good stunt work in this too, even though it's not the focus of the movie. There's just really nice little sequences that are really tight and well done. And then there was one more that I wanted to mention. Oh yeah, one of my favorite scenes is with him and Tiger, and it's like when they're having that true bromance moment, and they're just like in the car, and it's this great shot of them just flirting with these two girls that walk beside the car, and Tiger like puts a slushie or a drink or something into Chow's face, and it's straight out of a romantic comedy. They're laughing and looking at each other. It's pure bromance.
That tonal stuff is so funny. I really love that you brought it up, but like the idea of the killer you're pursuing being the guy driving you to the airport for that third act rom-com set piece stuff, that's so good. That's so good in construction.
Yeah, when I saw it, I couldn't believe it. I'm like, is he driving him to the romantic comedy ending right now? That's fantastic. Like, so yeah, stuff like that is great, and to still be able to hold like really deep and tragic drama throughout as well, and then just the ending is devastating. For sure. Yeah, it's very strong. Really good character work. So I'm gonna have to dive into some Ringo Lam because I don't know if I've seen anything else. Have we covered him before? I don't think so.
No, this is the first time covering Ringo Lam.
Yeah.
It's actually my first. The only other things that I saw, I know that he did Prison on Fire and School on Fire after this, and he also did another one with Chow Yun-fat and Simon Yam, actually, called Full Contact. And I think he even eventually did some stuff with Van Damme. So
yeah, I think I saw
maybe
that.
when we do some more Van Damme, we'll talk about him as well.
Yeah, he did a film called Replicant with Van Damme that I have sitting around on DVD in my flat. That I've been meaning to watch for a while. But I wanted to get into his Hong Kong stuff before I went through his American adventures.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And Replicant, that sounds like it might be like a sci-fi or something.
I think it is, yeah.
Beautiful.
I think it's like a sci-fi about him being a clone or something along those lines. It was direct to video, so you know it's going to be good.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Yeah, wait, hold on. There's one here. It's just, okay. It's just called In Hell.
That's awesome.
It's a Van Damme movie called In Hell that he released in 2003. So yeah, Cam, for you, final rating statements, etc.
Yeah, I'm more or less in the same boat as you two in that it's just this phenomenally visceral film, both in the moments of action that there are and in the emotions it's portraying, this existential crisis of Chow Yun-fat's character, and just this very this look at a very cold institution. It doesn't so much produce heroes as it produces bodies. At the beginning and end of the film, I mean, it's just bookended by these two undercover agents just both being snuffed out and just discarded. I found that final shot extremely haunting in a way that I did not anticipate. So I think, it's just so... Heroic Bloodshed is something that at the moment more or less begins and ends with John Woo for me. It's not like I have kind of very broad knowledge of Hong Kong action cinema, but not a very deep one. So it's been really fascinating to revisit this in all its sort of brutality and borderline nihilism in the presentation of its characters. It's incredible, and Joy to the World should not have worked as a song for an action scene.
That's true. I forgot about that little kind of like Christmas sequence.
It comes up twice, I think. I can't remember the first instance of it coming up, but yeah, when it's just playing in this sort of like juiced up 80s drum, like kind of electronic drum beat in the background. Yeah, as they've like jacked the taxi when the heist goes wrong, it's just insane.
Definitely.
Just yeah.
Hell yeah! So is that a 4 from you, Cam?
I'd say a high 4, mostly because I know about the sort of exuberance of something like Full Contact, and I'm not sure I want to put a roof on what Ringo Lam is capable of. Just yet.
I got to
something I'm definitely really excited to explore. I've seen like sequences from Full Contact that just look just out of this world, so I'm very excited to delve into more of his work.
All right, well, I think that's going to wrap it up for City on Fire here. We are going to be right back, and we're going to be talking about Deep Cover.
Oh, are you an ambitious boy? You're going to kill us.
You're not going to kill anybody. We're too valuable to him. There's no such thing as an American anymore. No blacks, no whites, no nothing. It's just rich people and poor people.
Larry Fishburne.
Don't blow your cover.
Deep Cover.
All right, we are back, and we are talking Deep Cover, the 1992 American action thriller neo-noir film starring Lawrence Fishburne, Jeff Goldblum, and directed by veteran actor Bill Duke in what would have been his, I believe, his second directorial outing, correct? Because I think he did Rage in Harlem before this.
Yeah. I think gathered some acclaim, but mostly he'd been doing character actor work alongside the likes of Schwarzenegger and other kind of staples of 80s action.
Yeah, we've talked about him once before, obviously, because we on the show, obviously, we had to do Predator at some point, and we will do Commando at some point too, where he's also in Commando. But that's how we're familiar on this show with Bill Duke.
Yeah, honestly,
so
I didn't even know he directed.
To see him direct something.
Yeah, I didn't know he directed, so this was great when I found out he was the one that directed this movie, because it was about, honestly, halfway through before I even clicked on his name to see his face, because I knew a Bill Duke, but I had no idea that he directed. So yeah, this was a great film, especially like you said, it was his second movie.
Yeah,
that's wild. Yeah, because it's fantastic.
Yeah, and this came out in obviously 1992, so this is like a very interesting time period in sort of like the gangster movie starting to be a little bit more dated, where people not taking it quite as seriously, except for obviously Goodfellas came out in 1990. People really loved that, and it kind of re-sparked people's interest in making them, but like a lot of them aren't as acclaimed as a lot of the 70s and 80s gangster movies are in certain ways. But I personally really love Abel Ferrara's King of New York, which came out in 1990, just 2 years before this. And King of New York cinematographer Bojan Bazeli actually shot this film as well. So if you're thinking, you know what, these films sort of have a similar look, and they also both have Lawrence Fishburne in them, that's part of that. I also do love that this is the last time Larry was ever credited as Larry.
Oh, nice!
Because obviously he had a career as a young guy as Larry Fishburne. He got started in like Apocalypse Now. I think he was only like 15 or 16 when that movie came out.
Yep.
But he was also we talked about him once as the henchman in Death Wish 2.
I think he's
which
the
is
guy
funny
that gets
because
shot.
Goldblum is also in the original Death Wish as the rapist.
Yeah, for real. And I think Fishburne is the one that gets shot with the boombox or whatever in the second one. I'm pretty sure.
Yes.
So he's got like one of the best deaths in Death Wish 2.
Yeah, so up to this point, he was an exciting young actor, but he was not getting a whole lot of leading roles. He was kind of like a supporting actor. He was either playing like a sort of like a small extra to being a full out supporting actor in something like I think he was in Nightmare on Elm Street 3. He was also obviously in one of Spike Lee's early films, School Days, which is fantastic, and he's great in that. There's actually a callback in this film to that film.
Oh, okay, yep.
And then obviously there's King of New York that he was in, and then Boys in the Hood. And Boys in the Hood was a huge thing that they used to market Deep Cover. You can even like see them call him like Lawrence Fishburne from Boys in the Hood or something like that in the trailer, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
But Deep Cover, I was absolutely blown away by this. This is a fantastic movie, and I really regret not checking out Bill Duke earlier because between him and Bojan Bazeli, who is just, I think, one of the most maybe not underrated cinematographers, but someone who should be getting more interesting work than he is. Like, he should be doing more than Mr. and Mrs. Smiths and Hairsprays and Underwater. But he works, I think, a lot with Gore Verbinski now. He did did
he do Wellness?
He did Cure for Wellness.
Oh, that looks so good.
He did The Ring, his version of The Ring as well.
Damn.
Lone Ranger.
Lone Ranger, yes, which I know people don't like. Personally, I think that's a great looking film, and the train set pieces in it are incredible. But he also obviously did a bunch of stuff with Abel Ferrara. He did King of New York. He did his Body Snatchers film as well. And also Abel Ferrara's China Girl, which is super, not super well-known Abel Ferrara, but it's a really cool kind of quasi New York City grime, West Side Story almost.
Cool.
About gangsters and stuff. But I think that Bill Duke and him together do something so incredible with the style in this. There's so much of deep red and blue neon lighting, these really stylish montages and expressive camera work that uses jump cuts and zoom cuts and wipes and Dutch angles and very, very intense and feverish style to it that I think is very poetic in its own way. And ostensibly the film is a blaxploitation-ish gangster movie about an undercover cop who is infiltrating the drug game in LA. And we kind of open on the character work that we talked about a lot in City on Fire, on how it gets sort of moral and existential. This one gets right off the bat from the very opening scene where Lawrence Fishburne, who's giving this very hard-boiled sort of narration, is talking about how his dad was a junkie, and around Christmas time, his dad was taking him to the local liquor store, and he was snorting cocaine in the car while he's there.
Yeah.
It's in the 70s in Cleveland, I think it announces. But he's basically driving his son to where he is going to rob a liquor store. And outside there's a Santa Claus, because it's Christmas time, and Santa Claus is giving him the ho-ho-hos and the Merry Christmases, and the dad comes back out having just shot up the liquor store, being don't teach my son any of that fairy tale shit, or whatever he says. And then he says, do you see, as he's holding in one hand a gun and in the other hand he's holding money. And as he gets shotgunned in the back, basically spraying chunks and viscera all over the windshield on a very tiny Lawrence Fishburne.
As tiny Larry just fucking watches his dad get destroyed. It's
brutally gunned
tragic.
Again, a very kind of brutal opening from a strange perspective, because we're situated inside the car as the blood sprays onto the window.
Yeah, that's true. The whole time the camera is really just with Lawrence. It's just the kid sitting there watching as everything goes on, rather than going into the liquor store and the dad shooting there and all that. It's really just from his perspective.
Yeah, which is really important, obviously, because this is a hugely impactful moment for him, and he even says, he decided in that moment that would never be me, that he would never get involved in the drug game, he would never get involved with alcohol, he would never get in with street hustling and for money. There's even a shot of his father's hand in the bloody snow covering blood-soaked money and stuff like that. This is a really impactful moment for him as a character,
right?
And sets up how big the decisions he's about to make in this film are when he does choose to, go undercover into the drug dealing scene.
And I think it's there's such a sadness too to just, seeing that kind of tragedy, your father robbing a liquor store on cocaine and then, being shotgunned. And then that's the reason that you get into policing, because you want to help the community. And the very first thing that we see when it transitions from him as a child to him becoming a cop is all of the African American people coming into the interview and being asked that disgusting question. And it's like that's the initial thing that he gets when he enters into this world that he thinks is going to, you know, help the community, and that's what he's striving to do. And there's just such a sadness to that right away without it being exactly, I don't know. I guess it's obvious, but
it's because it's a hard cut too, right? It's a hard cut to that would never be me, to the series of interviews where basically a federal agent, a white agent named Carver, is saying, do you know the difference between a black man and an N-word? And that is his opening question to these African-American cops who he is posing as possibly as potential undercover agents for him. And the reason that he's asking is because he wants to differentiate sort of like the people who see themselves as part of the street community and the people who are more indebted to themselves as the cops.
Right.
And he's lucky with Larry that Larry, because of his experience as a child, is more indebted to the police. But he does also have, you know, this implied kind of sadness and rage and repressed violence that is hidden underneath. And, you know, the guy sort of tells him, he's like, you know, you have this sort of like moral code, but like basically you pass your tests like you are a criminal. You resent authority. You have this rigid moral code, but you have no underlying system of values, is what he says. Look at all your rage, repressed violence. Undercover, your faults will become virtues if we have you pose as, you know, part of the community. And obviously he's very conflicted with this. So we, unlike City on Fire, where it kind of takes a little bit of time to get us into that central conflict, this movie's opening montages
that's one of the
get you immediately into it.
That's one of the things I noticed about this film right away, was that there aren't a lot of scenes of just people like sitting and talking, in the sense that it's not driving something forward. Every scene seems to be the next step in the operation that he's taking place in. Mm-hmm. And this movie absolutely flies by. Like, there's not an ounce of fat on this thing. It just goes from, you know, meeting with the head officer, telling him to do all these things, like become a better drug dealer, just start spending the money, do all this kind of shit. Immediately it'll cut right to him selling the drugs, and then right to him meeting with the other dealers or the other people that he's working with.
Yeah, the movie really moves and is very stylish in that way.
It's great. It's
very
just flies by.
It's very upfront about that racialized element, in that they're using members of the black community as these like building blocks for this operation. Mm-hmm. That I was very struck by the candidate before Lawrence Fishburne receiving that question, and then just being like, "What the hell did you say to me?" and just dragging the dude over the desk. Incredible.
And he's like, "Thanks, we're done here. Sorry."
It's such an incredible moment right off the bat, but also for me really clarified what he was, like you said, what he was looking for in candidates for these things, people who would differentiate themselves from other black people in this sort of, they're looking for this sort of burgeoning internalized hatred. And that it's so upfront about that element in this operation, rather than leaving it as something to be discovered, was very striking to me.
And what's sad too is like,
immediately you are like, this Carver federal agent dude is like immediately suspect.
Clearly a piece of shit.
And what were you saying, Jamie?
Well, I kind of lost my thought a little bit, but it was along the lines of like, there's just such a sadness to him, like, you know, we said that he's looking for people that kind of have this like internal hatred, but Lawrence Fishburne more so has, it's like this like unconscious, I guess, I wouldn't even really call it like an internal hatred when it comes to Lawrence Fishburne. It's more so like the way that the cop sees it, rather than what Lawrence actually feels about it, because Lawrence feels like he really wants to help the community, but then as this goes and he sees that there's no real path to do so, that kind of frustration from his childhood starts to come to the surface, right?
Well, yeah, and not only no path to do so, but that the people he's working with are actively involved in benefiting from it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So like that's the thing, is that obviously Lawrence Fishburne, they're looking for someone who is African American, who believes in the institution of police as someone who is going to do something good in his community, and he thinks that he personally, as an individual, is someone who can do that, and he's going to let this guy, hire him to go undercover in order to do that. And as Cam put, I think back when we were talking about City on Fire, there is this idea that he is doing this for the greater good, is kind of the thing, is that he is compromising his moral codes of not getting involved in drugs and not getting involved in crime, because he sees it as a means to an end of these things, and helpful, because you're right, he does have empathy for a lot of the poor community that he ends up infiltrating. And similar to City on Fire, he ends up realizing that he identifies in some cases more with them than he does the people he's actually working with.
Right.
In certain ways. And I think that is really important as we get to some of the developments made in this film, because I think that this is very secretly like maybe one of the most like complex and sort of like politically righteous versions of this kind of film that I've ever seen.
Yeah, for sure.
Where it actually takes on this very idea of, it begins again as that blaxploitation crime movie of, he's going to get involved with the dealers, and then it's the process of, him getting on the streets and making the connections and, doing all the things that he's going to do. And obviously, this kind of film also undercover it usually applies the men on opposite sides of the law moral contradiction, which is something we saw a little bit in City on Fire, and we see in all kinds of these kinds of stories. But what it morphs into is just something so bleak and so existential, and what is essentially, honestly, less of any kind of sort of like action or crime style movie than a straight up neo-noir about sort of like the systemic corruption itself, the war on drugs itself, as just this self-perpetuating machine that he is realized that he is a tool for, and that all of this sort of, the misery of the black and brown community that obviously he was so upset by in the opening scene, he realizes that this is something that systematically the institutions want. It's good for them. It helps them maintain their wealth and their power. And so this idea of them putting on this performance of, at one point Carver goes, "You know why you're doing this, man? Have you forgotten? Crack babies." That's right, dog. Yeah. And it was so funny because that scene really stood out to me, because that was used a lot very cynically as like, it's the fault of black mothers doing crack. That is the core issue, and that is what we're policing here. Right. And the way that he uses that, and in the movie, it's used the exact same way it was actually historically
complete manipulation.
Used in the war on drugs.
Yeah.
And it's just so crazy how Carver uses that and accesses Lawrence Fishburne's emotions about how upset, sort of like the misery of his own community brings him, and he's like, "That's why you're doing this." Yep. And then over the course of the film, he just realizes that, holy shit, the feds, the police, the politicians, everybody likes this system because it maintains their wealth and power that they have. And it actually takes it all the way to like literally overthrowing Latin American governments, which is something obviously that if you look up sort of like the it's an H.W. Bush? I'm trying to remember George Bush Sr.'s, because he would have been president at the time that this movie came out. And they actually cite him as someone who is golfing with these Latin American governments that are, sending the drugs in, which is just such a pointed thing to include in your movie. Absolutely. In the year that they're having an election against George Bush versus Bill Clinton would have been the election that year. Like, that's insane that is in just what is on its surface, like a stylish gangster movie. Yeah. So the fact that it ends up getting to all these different points, like, absolutely blew me away. And we'll get into some of the specifics as we kind of delve into it. But that really becomes Lawrence Fishburne's struggle as he realizes that he is compromising his own individual ideals for the, like, systemic system and hell itself that is actually, being unleashed on his community, and that not only is he not helping them, he's perpetuating the exact same thing that created his father.
Yeah, like
To cut in for a sec, could I cut in for a sec?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
Go
go for
Do
it.
Oh, sorry. I was just thinking about what you were saying about the system that he's perpetuating, and I think, just to put it shortly, like maybe the main difference between this and City on Fire in how it portrays that relationship between criminals and the government is I feel like in City on Fire it kind of embodies that sort of mirrored imagery of like the very thin line between cops and criminals, whereas Deep Cover is very much about that connection just being this chain, like a hierarchy that moves from the government itself down into these communities. And I found that sort of inextricable link between those organizations really fascinating and damning, like you were saying, considering the years they were made.
Yeah.
Especially when you consider that Bill Duke's next film was Sister Act 2.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
Yes.
But the lead officer, he has a line eventually where he's like, we might as well just take advantage of the spoils of war. And it's like they know. It's very strange because you'd think that their plan initially, at least, would be to help the communities, get the drugs off the streets, whatever. And as they've been doing this, and it's proved that none of this has worked. In fact, it's been getting worse, and it's just caused this kind of war. Instead of regrouping and going, all right, well maybe we should tackle it a different way. They just straight up take advantage of it and propel it forward and keep it going so that they just have a never-ending stream of cash essentially and power, and it's just disgusting. And then it kind of leads to like Lawrence Fishburne with that great line where he's like, this whole time I thought I was a cop trying to be a drug dealer, it turns out I'm a drug dealer trying to be a cop. It's just like that's one of the most compelling parts to this movie is all the scenes that aren't on the street, but when Lawrence goes back to the officer, like the initial one where he goes, look, I got like all this coke, like we can do something with this, get it off the streets, do something, whatever we got to do with it. And the guy's like, that's too much, it's out of our budget, so why don't you just go put it back onto the streets and become a legitimate drug dealer. Yeah, like he's just like, and then
you're a drug dealer, deal drugs.
Yeah,
is the line.
Yeah, exactly. And then the next scene, when he returns to that, you think, okay, maybe they'll bring it back, get Lawrence into the proper spaces, whatever. But instead, he's just like, you know what? Why don't you just spend that money? Get a nicer place. Live a little, You're a drug dealer. You're successful. Like, he's just turning him into a drug dealer. It's just, it was kind of like, it's darkly, like, it's not comedic, I don't want to say, but there's like this dark kind of, like, it's so dark that I found it almost funny that this is just like this never-ending...
It's that cosmic irony that comes with the territory. Like,
so obviously this is tragic.
Yeah, I mean, it being a noir, sort of borrowing the elements of noir, that these moments are all punctuated by that sort of knowing retrospective narration from Fishburne, where it's just like, and this next thing I did was the biggest mistake I made in my life, like that sort of thing that you'd get with those films, and just espousing on the grim irony of this situation. And that use of voiceover, I thought was really fascinating. Amazing. I read a really great thing by, I think it was Angelica Jade Bastian, who covered the film recently for Vulture, and she cites I'm just trying to remember the book name. Oh yeah, she cites a cultural historian talking about the sort of disembodied black voice. And you get, because like, so many films that in America that are about race are so concentrated on the politics of like the abuse of the quote unquote the black body. And I think it's Michael Boyce, who she cites, argues that specific use of voiceover is revolutionary purely because it's black film about being speculative and something other than being embodied, which is an idea that I think is really fascinating, and just this leveraging of film noir that is just never really done. I think that's just a fascinating, thought I'd bring that up as just, I think it's a really fascinating way of how the genre plays into the film's politics.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I really love a lot of the writing here is really strong as well, and he just gets like some some great lines to deliver. Like even just the way that because he delivers it in this very like hard-boiled detective-esque kind of way, but also he has kind of like this mournful, obviously, as you said, sort of like retrospective almost look to it, where he's just like, you know, there's a montage of him first hitting the LA streets, and there's all these Dutch angle dolly shots over like the Hollywood sign, and there's wipes and jump cuts and zooms as he starts, you know, moving his way around. And what's his line? Like the filmmaking is so energetic, and Bill Duke is cutting it a lot of time to the energetic music that he's using in the film. And Lawrence Fishburne just very dryly is like, life on the street is always the same.
Yeah. He's the coolest motherfucker ever.
Yeah. So I really love stuff like that.
There's a really wonderful line in the narration where I think it's at the point where he's being pushed more and more into embracing his image as a drug dealer, and he's starting to enjoy the quote unquote spoils of war as well. And he says something like, being a cop was never this easy. He just like just did a very drawn out long pause, which I really love. He's the coolest.
Yeah, and I mean, it should be worth mentioning just in general. I think this is one of my new favorite just Lawrence Fishburne performances in general. I think he's absolutely insane here. Everything he conveys in just close-ups of his eyes, and how, you know, sort of like, again, these complex feelings that he's having and these contradictions that he's having in someone who very clearly cares about his community and wants to see, you know, sort of like the pain and misery that he experienced with his father come to an end for everyone. But he's actively pursuing something that's not actually achieving that, but he thinks it is. And there's so much just pain in his face as he's doing that, and especially all the different ways that he's compromising himself in order to do that. The way that he's being pressured into, you know, becoming more of a drug dealer, as Jamie said, more of someone who's living on the street. And then later in the film, for example, there is so much dramatic tension wrung out of the first time that he is going to kill someone.
Yeah.
And it's a huge deal. It's a huge moral complication for him that he's just like, I am going to kill someone as an undercover cop, and he feels like very, very wrong about that. And part of this is sparked by his relationship with Jeff Goldblum's character, who we haven't introduced yet, but he's sort of like a yuppie Jewish lawyer who is involved in the drug scene in LA, and he's sort of like a second or third tier higher up. He's not dealing the drugs. He's got his own dealers, but you know, he's not quite as high as the people that they're actually after.
Yeah.
There's a meeting where Carver, the federal agent, like sits him down and says, okay, you're going after this right-hand man, the nephew of a, you know, sort of a Latin American government official. He's the guy who's actually pushing the drugs through, and ultimately we might even want to get to the top guy, which it's then obviously revealed later they absolutely did not want to get to the top guy. And it's a huge complication for Lawrence Fishburne's character, but he's told, you know, make your way up the chain until you get me to these two photos. Jeff Goldblum is one or two tiers just below those photos, but he realizes that Jeff Goldblum is an interesting figure in the drug scene because he's what they call sort of like a drug hobbyist, I guess. He's a lawyer. He's not someone who actually needs that money in any meaningful way. He's involved because it's just what rich people do. He's just like, yeah, I have a lot of rich friends who do drugs, and you know, they got me into it. I kind of like some of the designer drugs, and I kind of want to someday make some of my own. So his whole idea is to make enough money that he can basically start his own drug business, basically on the side.
The dream.
But when we see his house, he's just a regular, you know, sort of like living an upper middle class domestic life with his wife and his kid, and then all of a sudden he's got like Scarface characters walking onto his porch.
Yeah.
And Jeff Goldblum's not super stoked about that. But similar to City on Fire, Lawrence Fishburne actually strikes up a bit of a friendship with Jeff Goldblum because he himself he's performing this moral compromise, but in some ways he actually is compromising some of his morals. And in a lot of ways, Jeff Goldblum has also done that. Like Jeff Goldblum, when he's talking to him on a personal level, he's a fun guy. He's fun to hang out with.
Yeah.
He doesn't seem like the worst guy.
Funny, charismatic.
On the planet.
Yeah.
So he strikes up a relationship with him.
It's a very strange sort of inversion of, I feel like, a lot of films at the time. Like you'll get a lot of crime films in particular about cops have that sort of parasocial bond between like white cops and black cops, and you just have this weird inversion of it where you have that kind of cross-racial relationship between Jeff Goldblum's character and Lawrence Fishburne's, but like Goldblum's just remains kind of off-puttingly racist throughout, and they never truly I don't think they ever truly understand each other, but
it reminded me like a little bit of what we see in City on Fire, but with this one, I don't think Lawrence, I think he may have moments of where he kind of starts liking David a little bit, but overall I feel like there is an underlying like still a hatred or a disrespect for him.
You're a scumbag in some ways.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking too of like the way that David kind of uses and quote unquote appreciates black culture, it definitely feels like he's more of a vulture, less of an actual person that appreciates it for good reasons. And that was something I found interesting about his character too.
Jeff Goldblum's line is so goddamn funny, and their conversation is so funny because you're right. And Lawrence Fishburne pushes back against him, but there's a part where they're hanging out and he's cheating on his wife, and he comes out of having sex with a woman, and he's like goes up to Lawrence Fishburne. And he's like, "Why do I like balling black chicks so much?" And then what does Lawrence Fishburne say? He says, maybe you feel like you're fucking a slave. And Jeff Goldblum, without missing a beat, he says, like a bondage thing?
and then Fishburne's response, no, like a racist thing.
Yeah.
Extremely good.
So fucking good. And then what I love too about David's reaction to that, he just makes another joke about it because Lawrence says something about like fucking his dad and his mom at the same time. And then David is just like, oh, how was he? Or something like that. Like he just starts going with the joke. So he's like an outlandish, crazy, funny dude, but definitely has some horrible traits.
Yeah, I think yes, Jeff Goldblum, considering his character, he plays him very charismatically, and I think that's why Lawrence Fishburne, like more than anyone else who he's dealing with, he actually does try to work with him and sometimes enjoys the time that he spends with him in an interesting way. And as because I don't think it's a level of he ever gets that intimate level of friendship with him the same way of something like City on Fire. But what I do think is that he morally compromises himself enough that he feels like he's taken himself down to Jeff Goldblum's level.
Yes.
I mean, at a certain point, he quits the Force and just becomes legitimately his partner.
Just starts doing coke and going crazy. Yep.
Yeah, and obviously by the end of the film, this gets a little bit more complicated, and he makes certain elements. He makes his way back. He cuts himself off from both. But there is a stretch of the film where he is just Jeff Goldblum's 50-50 partner, and he is like not. He actually thinks that is a more moral choice than continuing to work with the Force at that point. Until obviously some elements complicate that later in the film.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, getting back to Lawrence Fishburne and obviously the sort of like direct way that Bill Duke depicts this moral compromise, I was really impressed with the sequence where he kills the dude
Ivy, I think.
Who
Ivy,
and he quotes Terminator on the street.
Yes.
and he's just like, "You seen that one? Go rent it. I'll be back."
Yeah. Dude, speaking of Ivy, just briefly, like his whole look is amazing. He's, very kind of small side character or whatever, and he dies, I'd say like half hour, 45 minutes in or something. But this dude is just absolutely jacked. He wears like super colorful vests, but with no sleeves, so that you could obviously just see those giant guns. And then he hangs out with this blonde white chick that has like a military hat on. It's almost it's like Nazi-esque, honestly. It's just so crazy.
It looked like a music video.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And they're in
Yes,
this like red
absolutely.
convertible just speeding down the fucking downtown streets. It's just, what a wild character.
Well, and
It's
the
funny
first
be-
time we're introduced to him, he's shooting a kid dealer on the street.
Yeah, yeah,
And that
first
scene is
time.
horrible. Like the neon red lit alleyway as the kid's running away in slow motion, he just like guns him through the back of the head.
Yep.
And everyone comes over and looks at it, and no one is like mourning it or freaking out. Everyone's like, "Oh, that's another day here."
Yeah,
And
yeah.
people start taking the money from the kids' pockets and things like that. It actually reminded me a little bit of I don't know if you've seen this, Cam. Spike Lee's Clockers.
Clockers is like one of the few I haven't seen.
Clockers. Well, it's worth noting. Clockers was a huge inspiration on The Wire, so it's very similar to that. It's very sort of like a almost journalistic procedural about sort of like drug dealing on the streets and how the kids get involved in some of the violence and stuff like that. But Spike Lee directs it with a bit more of a warmth and romantic quality of something that he would include in like 25th Hour. So
Okay.
that's what kind of separates it a little bit from The Wire. But this scene where the kid gets gunned down felt like straight out of Clockers because it has that sort of that really painful journalistic realism of the reality, but done in this very stylish, heightened
Yeah.
format. And even just the lighting in that scene, because again, the dude who kills him is practically a cartoon music video character.
Oh, yeah.
And
And
the
he's
lighting in
yelling
that
"Hasta
scene
la
is
vista" as well.
yeah.
Just insane moment.
So yeah, there's just this complex like emotional quality that comes out of the heightened style and the sort of like painful realistic quality of it, and so that's how we're introduced to this guy, and eventually this guy, because Jeff Goldblum and Lawrence Fishburne have started this partnership and they're going up the hierarchy in the drug game, this guy kills one of his dealers. And then, Jeff Goldblum and Lawrence Fishburne, they both kind of realize, you know what, like, we can't have a guy just kill our dealers and we can't respond back because it makes us look weak and we'll get taken over. So they decide together that they have to kill this guy. And it can't be someone that they just choose because it's not them. Whoever does this is going to get, sort of like the credit for doing it and the sort of implicit power of it. And I love Lawrence Fishburne's line that he gets here. I can't remember exactly what it is, but to paraphrase, it's basically like, by us, you mean me.
Yeah.
Because Jeff Goldblum, as the yuppie lawyer, is not going to be going into the street and gunning someone down. And that's where you get into some of the more sort of like implicit racism. He's like, well, you're the guy. You're the guy who looks like the guy who would go and shoot a guy.
Yeah.
So you've got to go and do it,
Yeah.
And when Lawrence Fishburne realizes that, it hits him, and he's so nervous. He's got to work his way up to do it. And the way that Bill Duke films this, and like all the colors in the club and the slow motion and the angles that he chooses, and as Lawrence Fishburne builds himself up to go and do this killing.
I was also thinking
And-
about how in that specific moment, like you've got all this kind of garish red and blue lighting of the club, but it sort of just drains away into that just kind of very plainly lit.
Yeah, the fluorescent lit
like
bathroom,
club.
right?
Yeah. Like it's just that when he walks in, it's just that sort of almost paled wall and the sort of horrible, like, there's just like black club bathrooms.
Yeah.
Just like in that moment where he's got to steel himself to do it, and the mask is kind of starting to slip, and just the color leaves the scene for a second. I thought was really phenomenal.
And you add to that filth too when he like turns around and right before he's shot and you got the squib work, he just starts pissing on Lawrence's like shoes or whatever, like.
Yeah, he says, "Want a suck or a drink?" That's what he says.
God. Classy man right there.
Just
Well,
what a way to go out.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and that's what's so funny is that there's nothing cool or dignified about this scene, very specifically.
No.
Which is very sort of different than we would get in something like the heroic bloodshed movies, where there is almost a cool factor to these characters. When Lawrence Fishburne kills this guy, you hate this guy. All we've seen is him kill people and kill a kid.
Yeah,
and just be like an asshole to everyone, get into fights. And so this is like the one moment where you would be like, yeah, shoot that guy.
Right.
Whatever. And it's still the fact that Bill Duke still turns it into a giant moral quandary, and that it feels so terrible and
You
so
can't escape it.
undignified. Yeah, and
Because,
immediately
that's-
after he shoots him, it's cut to outside in the shadowy blue rain where Lawrence Fishburne is basically having like a panic attack on sort of like the ladders on the sides of the brick buildings. And then there's like these close-up Dutch angles of him in his own like orange lit bathroom as he's like freaking out looking at himself.
And when he goes to the officer and tells him about it or whatever, and the officer is like, so what was it like to kill the drug dealer or whatever? And he, because throughout the lead officer has been saying the stupid line of like, well, I'm God, so I know everything.
I know everything,
and so
yeah.
fucking Lawrence is just like, well, you're God, so you know how it felt. And just coldly, like, just says, like, fuck you for even putting me in this situation, essentially, but without actually saying it.
And trying to, like, milk the grimy details from me as if they're entertainment.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, they weren't.
Yeah.
It felt terrible.
Like, I just killed a man, you fucking asshole.
That moment of where he sort of finally becomes an instrument of the state, like actively like killing members of his own community, and then, like you said, it becomes a sort of source of lurid entertainment. Is just that really hit me, considering like ongoing affairs in the States at the moment. But what struck me perhaps the most was in the writing of that narration, when I think it's happening when he's back in his room and he's just reflecting on what the hell just happened, and he just goes, I'd killed a man who looked like me, whose mother and father looked like my mother and father, and nothing happened.
He says, no one came after me, no one did anything, I could have killed others if I wanted to.
Yeah
Because he immediately associated crime with punishment because of his father's death. And now he's realizing that it's obviously more complicated than that. There isn't just the people who do bad things and the people who kill the people for doing bad things. There's a lot more moral complexity to what is happening to him. And that just gets thrown more into disarray as he gets deeper and deeper, because now he's like, I'm committed. I've done terrible things. This has to mean something.
Yeah.
So this has to, and as he just gets further and he descends further into it, Bill Duke is filming this whole thing again very stylishly, but I find around this scene is where it just gets even more sort of like hypnotic and depressing to watch as he just gets kind of deeper and deeper. And he starts messing with Jeff Goldblum and some of the other dudes in his circle, trying to like pit them a little bit against each other so he can sort of climb his way up, because again he's trying to make his way up to who's he trying to get to? I forget. There's Barbosa, who I think is the guy who Jeff Goldblum works with, who looks like a character straight out of Scarface. He looks like one of like the Colombian guys or something like that.
And then I know there's a guy named Felix, unless that's Barbosa, unless it's Felix Barbosa.
I think it is Felix Barbosa,
okay.
But they're trying Gygos. That's who it is. Gygos. They're trying to get to him, and I think his uncle is Hector Guzman, who is a guy that they are trying to take out at first because they think that he is the guy who is actually shipping the drugs into the country. That he's the top dog. Mm-hmm. But what does he find out? That, as he's pitting Barbosa and Jeff Goldblum sort of against each other, they find out, briefly that like Barbosa is an informant. There's this whole chase scene and scene where the local cops are trying to capture Jeff Goldblum and Barbosa, and Carver basically tells him to like not get involved in that. He's like, what the fuck do you mean? How do I not stop this? Like these guys are how we're going to get to the next level. Can't you just tell the cops to like not fuck with us?
Yeah.
And they basically say, I can't get involved in local law enforcement. I don't really have that power. And he's like, you're God.
Yeah, I thought you were God, bro.
How do you not have that power? And then so he realizes something is immediately up, the fact that he's being told to stop what he's doing as he's getting so close to getting the two guys they supposedly want.
Yeah.
And then he finds out after all that goes wrong, there's a huge, moody sort of ambush deal scene where all the cops are hanging out on the fence, like all lit up in neon red as the deal is going down below. And Lawrence Fishburne like drives Jeff Goldblum and Barbosa in the back of a limo, driving away from the cops. He's like nailing cops in the car, driving the limo. Jeff Goldblum has realized that Barbosa was an informant the entire time. And the fact that, he has his own sort of subplot about how he doesn't get respect from all the other guys.
Yeah.
because
That
he's just
slap
like, you know,
hand
some-
game is amazing.
Oh my god, I was going to bring that up.
Yeah, well, let's bring that up after because I do love this this highway chase scene too with David because like him just starting to pop Felix just in different body parts before he's forcing him to jump out of the moving car. It's just there's so much tension in this scene. It's ridiculous.
And then you have over
yeah.
and over again, like Felix the Rat.
yeah.
Felix the Rat. And the way that he's delivering it, he's so excited because he's
Yeah.
like, all of a sudden, he has less respect than Jeff Goldblum does now because Goldblum is more committed. He's not a rat.
Yep.
So Jeff Goldblum is just like screaming and shooting in the back of the car as Larry is like, you got to stop, man. Like, fuck it. I'm trying to make sure that, you know, we keep this guy so that, you know, we can get to the next level. But all Jeff Goldblum can think about is how this guy disrespected him and now how he gets to disrespect him, and it's quote unquote, you know, there's an ethical code, criminal code reason for doing that.
Yeah.
And dude, when he pushes him out of the car and the cop car just runs him right over.
Great dummy shot.
The dummy work on that made me like physically recoil because of how fast it is, how fast it hits him.
And then you
And
have
just runs
like,
him over.
and these two details are amazing because right before he jumps out of the car or is pushed out of the car, Lawrence Fishburne, as he's driving, just gives this like animalistic scream like that happens right before he jumps out. And then when it cuts back to the car, Goldblum is like out of the window and he yells at him like something about getting shrimp, motherfucker, or something like that. I can't remember exactly, but it's like it's just a really outlandish, funny, loud delivery, and it's what an incredible sequence. It's so good.
Yeah, well, and that rage in him expressed through like Lawrence Fishburne's performance is so kind of key too. And Jeff actually brings it up earlier in the film with a line where he says, "You have the gift of fury. You're a dangerous, magnificent beast," is what he calls him.
Yeah. Oh man.
And he's like, "Shut the fuck up."
And I mean, Goldblum delivering all these lines this is one of the best Goldblum performances as well. Like God tier Fishburne, God tier Goldblum. Like
yeah, the fact that you have both of them at the top of their game for
Yes.
these roles just makes them that much.
in
stronger.
such a
It makes the whole
stylized
that much
movie
stronger.
too. Oh, it's beautiful.
Goldblum's like kind of rambling energy is just so well suited to this character because he
Yes.
just seems like because it suits his confidence when he's in his own element, when he's in the courtroom and he kind of just walks all over people, and then when he's kind of under people's heel and, you know, where he's sort of stammering a little bit more, and then that evolves into more confidence and just
Yeah.
weird quips, and it's just he's so perfectly suited for it. It's just I'm surprised he hasn't done more like heel turns like this because he's so
I know.
fucking good at it.
I didn't even know there was a performance like this from Goldblum. Like I really wish I watched this earlier. It's fantastic, and I don't hear a lot about it, to be honest. I don't know why.
Yeah, no, it definitely should be because Goldblum's incredible, and it's so specifically suited to, again, playing just kind of like this this kind of yuppie, like upper middle class character
Yeah.
who his involvement in this is purely recreational. It's
Right.
like he's just like he's someone who could decide that he quits and just go back to being a
Yeah, he
lawyer.
doesn't need
and
to do
having,
this.
you know, a nice house and a family, and all his comfort is coming at the expense of, you know, Lawrence Fishburne's friends and family. That's the idea.
Yep.
Is that Lawrence Fishburne's involvement in this is so much more, I guess, personal and existential.
And even like Goldblum's family, though, he's willing to sacrifice their relationships too. Like there's that one amazing scene where he's talking to his wife, and his wife just breaks it all down and is like, "Look, you're a wealthy person. You have a beautiful daughter, a beautiful wife that love you and want to be with you. What more do you want?" And he responds with, "I want my cake and to eat it too." So like
which
only
coming out of Goldblum's mouth.
yes,
amazing.
dude, only Goldblum could have made that actually cool. Like it's an unbelievable line, great delivery, and just, you know, it's a great scene to just kind of blatantly show exactly where his mindset is.
The changes just like in his costume as well, and how it contrasts
Amazing.
with Lawrence Fishburne's one when they're both sort of starting to embrace the imagery of like being these partners in like a lucrative
Dude,
drug dealers.
by the end, they look like they're in Miami Vice.
Oh yeah, like Goldblum has like slicked black back hair
Hair
and the long black trench coat that's like leather, and oh my god, just
it just kind of
ripped.
it lends itself to this. I was just thinking about like, is this how they perceive like kind of these successful people in this line like to look like? And it's like these very different images because like Lawrence Fishburne is now dressing in like expensive suits of the kind that Goldblum would be wearing earlier in the film, whereas he's gone full like wearing these like leather trench coats and slicking back my hair. It's just the simplicity of that like kind of. There's sort of like inverse like changes in them. I think it's just so fascinating.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, well, and after this stuff with Barbosa, this takes us into kind of like the final stretch of the film, the final like half hour-ish of the film, and the part where Lawrence Fishburne's like all of his sort of anxiety and paranoia about how what he's doing is so clearly feels wrong. On a street level, on the intimate level that he's experiencing all of these events, this descent that he's in, nothing about it seems like it's a good thing or it's preventing bad things from happening. If anything, he's just partaking in the bad things, and he feels like more of them are happening because he's pretty good at the work that he does.
And he's being constantly reminded too, because we have that character that kind of pops up every once in a while that seems to be like he grew up in the community and now he's become like he helps the police, but he also seems to be one with God a lot of the time, and he's the guy that
the detective
Lawrence,
he calls the Reverend.
Yeah. It seems like he is kind of like this reminder for Lawrence as the film goes on that it's like this is what you were trying to do, like this is like what you want to strive to do, help your community. So it is interesting to constantly have that he's struggling with as well, just like a character like remember your community, even though he's too overwhelmed and too much going on.
Well, because technically that guy's on a lower rung than he is. I mean, he thinks he's talking to just a street guy, but he's undercover. So there's this element where that guy is technically also being kind of used by the system, but he can feel more, I think, morally righteous about it because he's working on such a small scale that he feels like, he is point blank on the street taking drugs off the street. That's his basic thing. And what Lawrence Fishburne is realizing is that he's compromising himself to get to that greater good, realizing that greater good is really never going to come. As Carver basically straight up admits to him, is he's just like, look, the State Department, we like Hector Guzman now. He's going to run for president, and maybe we can have some power in some of these countries, so we're going to help him. And Lawrence Fishburne gets this god tier line where he's just like, so what's the deal now? He helps you fight communists. You let him bring drugs into the country to sell it to minorities and use me to do it. And he's like freaking out, and he's just like, oh, you're getting all conspiracy and paranoia on me. And it's so funny because like we now know, because of like Iran Contra and stuff like that, we know that a lot of this stuff actually did happen, and the CIA was like literally selling cocaine to get help in overthrowing governments and stuff like that. But what does the guy say to him? He says, man, before it was all, oh dude, crack babies, that's why we're doing all this, right? This is so bad. Like, it's black women being addicted to drugs. That's the issue here. Yep. And now he's saying, you know what? It's all bullshit, man. Let's just go to Washington. Yeah. We did a good job here. Maybe they'll give us a bigger budget. So it's no longer about the lives of his friends and family that's been sold to him. It never was. Policing drugs has been revealed to just be another tool in like a global capitalist economy, basically.
It was purely manipulated.
He gets so disillusioned by that he just full out becomes Jeff Goldblum's 50-50 partner. They shoot Gagos in a rep movie theater. They just gun him down in the deal, and they steal like basically like a bunch of his money, and they basically sell it back to Guzman, where they say, we'll give you 80% of your money back that we took if we can keep 20% of it to start our designer drug business, basically. And there's so many cool elements in this where they're dealing with Guzman, because Guzman has diplomatic plates, because Guzman is a actual political ally of George Bush. Oh. So they're literally being like, we are now directly dealing with the highest tier, and in this, he's come to the realization about the war on drugs, again, as this self-perpetuating machine that involves money and politics and control, and that they don't really want to have an end to it because there's so much cash flow and it's so beneficial to the State Department guy just wants a bigger budget. Jeff Goldblum just wants a bigger house. This is all of this stuff can only come at the expense of directly the black and brown misery that Lawrence Fishburne has been trying to prevent this entire time. And it's so fascinating, even just on a procedural level, watching the cop be like, well, I can't really take this guy because he's got diplomatic plates. I can't arrest the guy who's here on official political business with our country.
Yeah, and I also love Goldblum or David's kind of breakdown of his thought of just where he is now. The thought of any helping of a community is completely just gone now. There's nothing left. And his one line that he says to them when he's trying to make the deal and negotiate, he's like, I think you know that there's no such thing as an American anymore. No Hispanics, no Japanese, no blacks, no whites, no nothing. It's just rich people and poor people. And the three of us are all rich, so we're on the same side. It's just so good.
Unbelievable line.
It's so good.
And there is some sort of like poisonous irony a little bit too to having the Jeff Goldblum character be delivering like what is essentially like the thesis of the movie at that point.
Yeah.
And that line is super good during that deal. And this is again when Jeff Goldblum and Lawrence Fishburne are now, they're in full sunglasses and suits.
Right, yeah. Hair slicked back, long
full
trench
Miami
coat.
Vice.
Yeah.
And the detective shows up to interrupt this deal essentially. And I love that he goes and he's like, Guzman, he goes up to him and he's like, are you okay? Like, what's going on here? And his line where he's just like, I keep my money in the bank. Thank you for your concern, officer. Because again, this is a respectable, performatively,
right.
This is a respectable person, a member of the financial and political economy of the United States. But we know it as now, this is just, that's how in bed all of these people are in this system. And Lawrence Fishburne, unfortunately gets involved in a drug shootout here where I believe the detective's name is Taft. Taft is shot in this scene and he's bleeding out, and Lawrence Fishburne is he has a very existential again crisis about this moment, because the detective is basically trying to arrest them. And he's just you don't the detective, you just have no idea how big this is. Arresting us isn't going to do anything.
Yeah.
There is no way that policing this situation is going to, actually prevent what's happening. But the guy so believes. Basically, we're looking at where Lawrence Fishburne was at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
You see another world where Lawrence Fishburne is this guy who's I believe in the institution of policing.
To the very end.
And I'm going to stop this situation from happening. And my God, when Jeff Goldblum just looks down at him holding his bloodied body and is like, the same people that taught us virtue are the very ones who enslaved us, baby. Yep. And he just shoots him in the head. And Lawrence Fishburne's reaction to that and the look and the misery on his face.
Yeah,
unbelievable.
And there's something about the way that he delivers that line too. He's got this nice close up, and it's right before he shoots the guy. Right, he hasn't done it already.
Yeah, it's before.
So to me, it gave me this last little it was almost like he felt like the devil giving him a final deal, where it was look, you've seen the corruption, you've seen that there's no good or bad really. It's just all just horrible. So just join me. They've enslaved you, so just let's split the $500 million. And there's just this slight moment right before he does shoot him that it felt almost like the devil giving him a deal kind of thing. And then just the ruthlessness.
Sorry, I was just going to say just that it is the moment where Fishburne's character finally reveals himself as being a cop, and his reaction is to basically just shrug it off with that line.
Yes.
Yes.
He's like, I don't care. Let's just keep doing what we're doing.
He's fully embodying that that rich and poor perspective.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he's totally just being like, it doesn't matter what you were. You could just be a partner with me still. We could just leave right now.
Yeah. He's like, because I know what you're capable of.
But obviously, Lawrence Fishburne's character is just so much more like this war on drugs crisis is so much more personally impactful to him. He has skin in the game in a way that Jeff Goldblum doesn't. And Jeff Goldblum's like, who cares? Let's just leave. Let's just get out of here. We don't even have to come back.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And what he's just symbolically witnessed is basically the person who he sees as previously as morally righteous, someone like him. He sees how they lose, how the pain continues, and the rich people just get richer. That is what the sort of overall allegory that he's seen in that final scene is, that the Guzman gets to leave, with no issues. Jeff Goldblum gets to escape with all his money, and the only people that are going to die and continue to die are the people he's seen on the street, the people that he's killed, and the people who genuinely want to see an end to it, like this Detective Taft character.
Right.
And also, by the way, this is where the shout out to School Days comes in. David, or Jeff Goldblum, gets to say, wake up, over and over again, as Lawrence Fishburne is obviously in this sort of like almost this sort of like haze that he's in.
Oh yeah,
and that's the line that Lawrence Fishburne gets to say over and over again directly to the camera in School Days. He basically just yells, "Wake up!" But yeah, oh my god, this final scene, and then obviously Lawrence Fishburne, he realizes that going off with Jeff Goldblum and just ignoring this to him would be just as bad.
Yep.
And he gets in a gunfight with him, and even just watching them shoot each other again, there's nothing spectacular or even cool about it at all.
Yeah, they just stand and start shooting until one of them gets hit.
Yeah, and even Jeff Goldblum being a scumbag, he's kind of like a charismatic, understandable scumbag. He's basically just nihilistic.
Right.
He's basically just someone who's like, this is all meaningless, who cares? And Lawrence Fishburne can't believe that because, of who he is.
Yeah.
Jeff Goldblum, because of the color of his skin, can separate himself from that, but Lawrence Fishburne is like, I can't.
Yeah.
This matters to me more. And yeah, watching him just sort of like shoot him, and again, he doesn't feel good about it. There's nothing to feel good about by the end of this film. Even as he goes to the courts and his superior, he praises his superiors and is like, we took down this high profile drug ring, and it was because of all the work of the amazing FBI and federal agents and all of this.
But also
basically praises all these people he knows are fucking evil.
Yep.
And then in the court, he captured video of Guzman doing a deal with them, and it's like, so here's a friend of a golfing buddy of George Bush,
so peace
dealing
out
with us.
He just like pieces out. He's like, deal with that.
He's sort of coerced into that, into sweet talking, or like talking up the DEA in that trial where they've basically got his girlfriend and like a subordinate of his and David's, they've kind of got her on her way out of the country, and they're basically like going to charge her with something unless he like talks up like how successful the operation was, how it all went swimmingly thanks to the DEA agent and the actions that they took. And then he kind of just drops that. He goes along with the plan right up until the moment where he's just like, oh, and I have this tape to show the court, and he just drops it in like a bomb in the middle of it. And it's so wonderfully timed, and also part of this moment that what you came to with Jeff Goldblum's character and his sort of nihilistic detachment from everything. I think that, coupled with the moment where he sort of manages to scramble out from underneath the DEA with that tape, is kind of like the film starting to shed its noir influence as well. Like, like where a sort of noir film is like a little more nihilistically detached in the same way that Jeff Goldblum might be, and in the guise of that genre, this film might have ended with, probably would have ended with Lawrence Fishburne dying at that point, but he neither dies as a criminal or a cop, but he sort of, to some extent, liberates himself from both of those, from that one institution.
Yeah.
And I think that's really fascinating, like that he escapes in that way, and that it defies the genre in that way. For something reckoning more with the personal consequences of everything that's happened. But because, like you said, there's no positive resolution or no positive resolution possible given all that's happened, and then that money that he's left with he's just like, I don't know what to do with this.
Yeah, well, because he basically just tells you, like, look, this contradiction exists in the real world politically, and if you're a black man living in that country, you're just going to have to live with that contradiction. So he doesn't get the escape route of death, even though, for many people that he's seen in the community and in this story, it has been. But he's just like, there's something interesting in the choice that Lawrence Fishburne is like, I just have to live with that knowledge now. Yeah. And I think his final lines are, it's an impossible choice, but in a way we all have to make it. What would you do? That's what he sort of lends. So they really do want you to focus and think about that, that dilemma that he's under.
Yeah. Also that very kind of cyclical image of him placing the blood money on the grave of,
right.
What was it? His neighbor's grave. One of the sort of victims.
Oh, was it?
I think she like ODs, I think.
Yeah.
Earlier in the film. And he's
the woman who has the single mom.
Okay, I didn't actually notice the name on the tombstone. I just assumed it was him visiting his father's grave, but
I thought
it
was
wrong.
It could have gone either way.
I had both
the
thoughts
name either because
honest.
he took the son there.
Oh, okay.
And because he took the son there, so I figured it might have been her. But then I suppose like not knowing is kind of part of the point, like this sort of broad spectrum of victims.
There's a lot of bodies in the ground.
Yeah.
Linked by one bit of blood money.
Yeah. And also, this is a really minor point, but I thought it was a funny little connection. I do like that both these movies end with an officer clocking the superior officer and not being charged for it. Really awesome connection there.
That's why I picked him, baby.
Yeah, that's the deep connection right there.
I totally forgot that he totally clocks Carver right in the face outside the courthouse because they were like, dude, why the fuck would you do that? Why would you pin Guzman? Like, we have all our political eggs in that basket, and he was just like, yeah, fuck you all.
Yeah.
Oh, just a really small moment which I thought was just so fucking funny. Like, to follow up on the punch is, I think it's Lawrence Fishburne, like Russell's attorney. She just like kind of touches him on the shoulder or something, like, and walks past him, just like, wow, this very sort of demeaning little gesture from her, and I was just like, where did he hire this person?
Yeah, man, this is such a good film. Oh my god.
Yeah, I mean, pivoting towards the reductive rating round, this one actually first time watch got the 5 from me.
Nice. I'm so close.
I was honestly like blown away by both. Bill Duke's, sense of style, the insane wipes and jump cuts and Dutch angles and the expressive neon colors and the feverish montages and everything. And the whole thing just has this really stylish atmosphere that swings between, Lawrence Fishburne's character, his intense, like, righteous rage at obviously the misery that he sees in his own community, but then also this kind of like mournful sensitivity at the same time, and the way that it switches back and forth between the two I found incredibly effective on like a visceral level. And again, the way that he complicates scenes like his first killing and turns it into a really, really huge moral dilemma, and the way that this is so like politically charged and on a personal character level at the same time. It's both things at the same time. I love Larry's arc of being so viscerally traumatized and having such a moral code against the idea of drugs and crimes, and he sacrifices and compromises that because he's told by the institutions that that they are going to fight it, that on their surface they're going to do it for a moral good, a greater good, and he sees that pain and he wants to prevent it, and you completely understand that on an individual character level for him until he's confronted with that giant systemic beast that is just kept alive, and because it's beneficial for his higher ups, for the wealthy friends, for the budgets. I love that it doesn't just pin it on sort of like the rich people in it recreationally like Jeff Goldblum. It's also on the federal government's budget. They're just like, this benefits us if we crack down on crime and we make the appearance of looking like we're doing that. It looks good for us. We get paid more.
Yeah.
So that's a reason for them to keep it going. And yeah, so just to watch, all these characters who don't take any of this shit home with them. We assume Carver also has an upper middle class life. We assume everyone else in this film sort of does, that they have an existence outside of this war on drugs.
Right.
But Lawrence Fishburne's entire existence is just infected by it. And his performance, the way that he expresses all that pain and betrayal and rage and empathy all simultaneously, I think that this is a gangster movie and a blaxploitation and a neo-noir that should be held to the same esteem as like some of the best gangster movies and neo-noir movies that I've seen. Like I love King of New York. I love Carlito's Way.
It's reminded me of Light Sleeper as well, if you've ever seen that one.
I haven't seen that, but I've been meaning to for a while.
Yeah, really good.
I'm waiting on. There's an Indicator re-release of Light Sleeper coming in like January, which I'm waiting.
I just saw that announced. Yeah, that's cool.
That's
awesome.
There's
gonna
that
be a Blu-ray
funnily
of that
enough,
soon.
that and Devil in a Blue Dress, and I'm
nice.
gassed about both.
That's awesome.
Amazing. So yeah, I just got to say, like, I was absolutely blown away with this on like a stylistic level. On a writing level, I think it's just incredibly well done as well. I gotta look up some of the guys who wrote this.
The dialogue is just so quick and witty and like gross, but in the best ways sometimes. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, well, I mean, even some of the tough talking narration, it's almost poetic. Like, there's a line in here that Lawrence Fishburne gets where he says, "The jungle creed says that the strong must feed on any prey at hand. I was branded a beast at every feast before I became a man." Yeah. I think is something that he says.
Yeah, and it's like all in that inner monologue, and he's got that deep voice. It's fantastic. Such a mood.
Yeah. So and again, his character journey of being just so angry at the idea of drugs and crime as a personal choice. There are moments in here where he just genuinely gets upset at some of the addicts for being addicts. And then he realizes that all of that rage really should have been directed at the system that creates the conditions that results in people like his father existing. He's like, my father didn't exist in a vacuum. He didn't just decide one day, I'm going to be a cocaine addict and go shoot up a store. Yeah. There is poverty and systemic reasons that exists. And I think that that's just absolutely insane that this movie gets at that while also being an incredibly like effective, stylish crime movie all at the same time. So blown away. 5.
Yeah, I'm almost there. I honestly feel like my rewatch will get it. It's in that same kind of vein as like how I viewed Carlito's Way and things like that. I think I just need that second watch because this thing is just airtight. It just hurls you through his experience, like through his personal crisis, his identity crisis. Just climbing the ranks and then having that separation between him being on the streets and then Carver just being this, piece of shit that's just basically telling him to do all these awful things for the quote unquote greater good. It's just absolutely tragic. It's two absolutely god tier performances by Goldblum and Fishburne. This is like their best, at least top 3 for me, at least. And this, I gotta watch more Bill Duke because the style on this thing is unbelievable. I don't know if he like ventured into this kind of style with his other movies, but like it's a gorgeous, just an absolutely gorgeous film. And the last thing I'll say is that the deep cover, the theme song, which I don't know if we mentioned yet, is unbelievable. I mean, you have you got Dre. It's so good, and you got Dre, and you have I think it was Snoop Dogg's debut, I believe. Too.
It's Snoop Dogg's debut before he featured on The Chronic with Dr. Dre.
Yeah, it's when they called him Snoop Doggy Dog.
Well, he's Doggy Dog.
Yeah. So it's just like that. That was awesome, and for anyone that is interested, I just gotta give a recommendation. Big Pun made a song in '98 called Twins.
I was just about to say that.
Using this instrumental, and it is one of the most fire fucking rap songs I've ever heard in my life. So just highly recommend that, and highly recommend this movie. It's so damn good. So yeah, 4 out of 5 for now, but I do feel like it's gonna get that 5.
For you, Cam.
I'm in on that 5 as well. Definitely for the reasons that you both said, in that it's just so stylistically accomplished and just leveraging both the cadence and just the visuals of noir in this way that it's just not often done, especially with reference to racial politics. Like this very not just in the terms of like it's like who Sorry, I've just really garbled my words there.
Oh, no problem.
It's a leverage of film noir just in the sense of who it's interested in and who is voicing it. That narration, I think, really stuck with me for those reasons. And also just because it feels like a kind of strangely miraculous film, just considering its placement. Not just when it came out and also who made it. It's a very eclectic group of creators. Just like looking at the screenwriters, I think one of them was Henry Bean, who did a film called The Believer, like in 2001, which was like just very strange. I don't want to call it like I don't want to say it's like a fluke, but it's just it's a real oddity in I was gonna say
the Believer, that's the one where Ryan Gosling plays a Jewish man who's a neo-Nazi, right?
Yes.
I think that's what that one is. And then you're right, so it was written by him and then co-written by the guy the Oscar nominated writer of Robert Altman's The Player. What?
It's such a strange nexus of creative talent. Like it just feels miraculous that it's there and that it's done in the way that it is and that it's so confrontational. Like it's so specific in its indictments and very clear in a way that
the fact that a movie in 1992 name dropped George Bush being involved in
drug war,
government drug dealing,
crazy.
It rules
in the year that the election was up against him. That's fucking crazy.
Yeah, that's wild.
It's so good. And
Google George Bush Iran Contra, by the way, if anyone doesn't know any of that stuff, you'll have a good read.
And I don't know how it compares to the rest of Bill Duke's filmography because, as I mentioned, he directed Sister Act 2, Back in the Habit, the very next year.
Yeah,
but it's just utterly incredible work, and sort of feels like a refute to a lot of the kind of work that Bill Duke was doing as an actor and as a sort of director of television, because he was very involved with things like Miami Vice and Hill Street Blues and these kind of more righteous depictions of cops. So again, that like the just bluntness of the sort of bluntness of its indictment against the institution of policing is just crazy good. Like especially in the way that it's executed.
It feels like just a perfect storm of like of creatives, of so many people at the top of their game. These writers, Bill Duke, the actors, everyone. It does feel like a bit of like a miracle movie in a way, and I was surprised that I haven't heard more people talk about it in the vein of like crime and gangster stuff. Like this should be again. I think this should be held in similar esteem. The fact that I was thinking of things like King of New York and Carlito's Way and Clockers and some of these just amazing little crime films. Nuts that this isn't talked about more.
Absolutely,
it should be enshrined.
Yeah.
It's a really, really, really great film.
Awesome. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for this week. That was went a little long there.
Yeah, thanks for sticking with us.
City on Fire, 1987. Amazing. And Deep Cover from 1992. Thanks so much, Cam, for joining us and bringing these with you. If you've got anything to plug, what are you writing? What's up?
Yeah.
Oh,
we usually have you do that.
Oh man, you've caught me in the middle of some downtime with writing, but recently I did a video essay for the BBC on Ryan Coogler and his few films. You should be able to catch that on YouTube as of today.
Cool.
It was previously just available on BBC iPlayer, but that's region locked. So I think now you should be able to watch it if you are overseas. So I'd say that's the main thing, yeah. But you can also catch me on Twitter. Do you leave handles in?
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah. I mean, nothing else to plug, really.
Awesome. Well, for our listeners, we are going to be back in 1 week's time. We are going to be doing, I got to get my list out here. We're going to be doing, continuing Noir-vember. We are going to be pivoting over to 60s Japanese noir. where we are going to be talking about Seijun Suzuki, and we're going to be talking about his two most acclaimed films. We're going to be talking about Tokyo Drifter from 1966 and Branded to Kill from 1967, two Japanese noirs that have a very jarring, fractured editing style and a bunch of visual idiosyncrasy and craziness. One a candy-colored, like, Yakuza explosion, and the other one basically a black and white expressionist nightmare version, both directed by Seijun Suzuki and both incredible. So again, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast for that episode. That's going to be next week. And then in 2 weeks' time, we are going to be back, and we're going to be doing some deep cut noirs. We're going to be doing a from what I haven't seen either of these yet, but we're having special guest Peter Labuza on, who is very, very well versed in classic and Hollywood cinema. So when I had to ask him to come and do some noir. He wanted to bring on stuff that people hadn't really heard of. So he's bringing Phantom Lady, which is, I believe, a feminist noir from the 40s. And then we're going to be talking about one called May God Forgive Me, which, from what I understand, is a Spanish noir.
Oh, interesting.
So we're going all out for Peter Labuza's episode, and hopefully we can find those. Phantom Lady, I just picked up the Arrow Blu-ray of, so I'm going to be able to watch that. But I think May God Forgive Me is going to be another one of those. We can only find it in 240p on YouTube kind of watches. So
love it.
Either way, we're going to do some real deep cut noirs that Jamie and I haven't seen, and I'm very curious. Peter's very, very well versed in that time period, so I'm sure he knows what he's bringing. But yeah, that being said, that's going to wrap it up for everything this week. Thanks so much, guys, for listening, and keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy.